Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the powdered, wax-slicked world of Colonial Boston, where hairpieces were flammable, lighting was an all-evening activity, and your career options included wig duster and bell snuffer. You'll be moving slowly through cobbled lanes, ducking beneath low-hanging lanterns, and quietly inhaling the fine mist of hair powder that somehow smells like vanilla, old cheese, and ambition. The year is somewhere between 1720 and 1770. Give or take a historical dispute or two. Your boots are wooden-soled and uncooperative. Your stomach is full of boiled cornmeal, and your ears are full of gossip about Mr. Pritchard's new satin cravat, which, allegedly, he imported himself. You've got a long shift ahead, and it starts with a wig the size of a roast turkey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is. I love seeing all the cozy corners around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the cold. Not brisk and charming, but damp and Bostonian, where the fog rolls in early and leaves your wig powder clumping before breakfast. You're a house servant today, attached to a middling but upwardly mobile household with political leanings no one wants to talk about too loudly. Your job? Wig maintenance. Not styling, heavens, no. That's for the barbers. Your job is the dusting, the depowdering, the occasional reapplication, and when things get dire, the full powder and curl cycle with heated tongs that smell faintly of singed ambition. Wigs, at this point in colonial society, are more than fashion. Their declarations. A white powdered peruke with careful curls says, "I am a gentleman, I know Latin, and I absolutely expect to be addressed as sir by the man handing me my oysters." The richer the powder, the more likely it is to contain hints of iris root, starch, or ground lavender. The poorer the man, the more likely it contains flour and the faint regret of using too much. Your tools are modest but revered, a stiff bristled brush made from horsehair, a linen cloth, a shallow basin for rehydrating wilted locks, and your pride, a tin of your own mixed powder, held closed with a strip of wax string. You've named it Cloud Number 3, because the first 2 batches were far too sticky. You begin your morning crouched in a low-ceiling pantry where the wigs are kept on carved wooden heads. The house owns 4, 2 for Mr. Caldwell, 1 for his increasingly anxious son, and 1 for guests, though it's rarely used and has developed a permanent tilt to one side. As you shake the dust from the guest wig, tiny clouds puff into the air and drift lazily toward the shelves, settling onto the apples with a thin coat of social aspiration. Historians still argue whether wigs in colonial Boston were truly daily wear for everyone of means, or more ceremonial, special for courts, public occasions, and the occasional dramatic exit from a tavern. What is certain is this: owning more than one wig meant status. Maintaining them meant trust. And trust was the most valuable currency in a city where politics, loyalty, and fashion all curled together like an overly ambitious hairpiece. You carry the first wig upstairs on a lacquered tray, careful not to tilt too far lest the curls slide into an unfortunate clump. Mr. Caldwell awaits, standing shirtless in a dressing robe embroidered with some kind of mythical bird that looks like it gave up mid-flight. He nods at you without turning. You fit the wig onto his balding crown with the tenderness of someone placing a pie in a trembling oven. He grunts. The seal of approval. Downstairs, the candles sputter and flicker in their holders. Your colleague, Elijah, is preparing the snuffers. Elijah's job is quieter than yours but no less essential. While your mornings begin with powder and pride, his end with smoke and silence. The bell snuffer's role is to extinguish the day, literally. Long before gaslight or switches, homes relied on tallow candles and oil lamps that needed coaxing out each evening. The tools of his trade are a set of long-handled instruments, shaped like tiny bells at the end, thus the name. To snuff properly, one must hover the bell over the flame just so, depriving it of oxygen without smothering the wax into a mess. It's an art. A twitch too fast, and you scorch the wick. Too slow, and the room fills with smoke. And no one in this house wants smoky candlelight. It suggests poverty, or worse, per training. Together, you and Elijah sometimes trade grumbles in the kitchen once the house is quiet. He complains about high shelves. You gripe about powdered dandruff. You ever think about just walking out? He asks one night, chewing a hard biscuit with the energy of someone punishing themselves. Where to? He shrugs. Philadelphia. They say they've got streets wide enough for silence. You don't answer. You're watching the candle stub flicker in the corner, wondering if it's worth relighting for just one more letter. Outside, the city breathes with slow confidence. Ships creak in the harbor, taverns empty one drunk at a time, and the street sweepers pass like ghosts with brooms. You go back to your room, really a shelf with a curtain, and you open your powder tin. There's enough for tomorrow. Just barely. And you wonder, not for the first time, if someone will ever remember the names of people who spent their lives holding other people's hair together. Probably not. But you do. And so do I. The sun has barely nudged over the harbor when you rise again, before the roosters, before the baker, before anyone except the milk boy who always looks mildly surprised to be alive. Your boots are still damp from yesterday, and one heel clicks louder than the other, which makes you sound like a dramatic character entering stage left. Today's duties begin not with wigs, but with lanterns. Specifically, the hallway sconces that line the main corridor of the Caldwell residence, each fitted with an oil lamp just high enough to annoy short bell snuffers and just smoky enough to drive one to mild indoor swearing. But first, your face. In the mirror, you barely recognize yourself, hair flattened from sleep, faint puff of powder still clinging to your eyebrow, from where, you'll never know, and that unique sheen of someone who has already had enough of today and it's not yet 6. You wet a cloth and press it to your cheeks. Cold. Sharp. That'll do. Downstairs, the kitchen is warm and already fragrant with burned oats. Mrs. Keene, the cook, nods without looking up. She has been up longer than you and carries the energy of a woman who has outlived 2 husbands and several stoves. She mutters something about jam shortages. You nod solemnly, because nothing invites chaos like a missing preserve. You collect your tools for the morning circuit. An oil rag, a lamp hook, and a small copper container of whale oil, today's fuel of choice. It's heavy and pungent and historically accurate in a way that your nose resents. You start at the front of the house, lifting the glass covers carefully, trimming wicks, and whispering a little apology to each flame as you remove it. The flames sputter like offended cats but eventually go out, leaving behind a gentle trail of soot and a faint scent of melted purpose. The sconces are soot-lined and fickle, but it's better than total dark. Remember, gaslight won't reach Boston until the early 1800s, and in the meantime, whale oil and tallow rule the evening. It's said that some households tried fish oil for a time, but the resulting scent convinced even the stingiest Bostonians to pay for something less revolting. You refill one of the lamps, steady-handed. Elijah showed you how to do it without dripping a single glob of oil. The trick, he said once, is to pretend the lamp is judging you. It is. You pass. On your 3rd lamp, you find a moth inside the globe, still alive, flapping like an anxious paper fan. You tilt the glass gently and coax it out. It flutters away, grateful, probably, though with moths, who knows? This work is quiet. Intimate even. The city outside is waking. Horses clop, bells ring. Somewhere a vendor is shouting about radishes like their treasure. But here, in the long hallway of the Caldwell home, you're alone with light and shadow. Historians still argue whether homes of middle-class colonial Bostonians truly had oil-lit sconces or if it was a habit reserved for the upper echelon. Records suggest a mix. But what's certain is that someone had to keep them lit, trimmed, cleaned, and eventually snuffed. And in this house, that someone is often you. Once the hallway is done, you move to the study. Mr. Caldwell is in there already, scribbling something with unnecessary fury. He grunts when you enter. You nod and go about your task. He pauses and mutters, "Be careful with that one, it's French." You glance at the lamp. Sure enough, the glass has a floral etching. The fancy kind. The kind that costs half a month's wage to replace, and an awkward silence if it breaks. You steady your hands and adjust the wick. It hisses briefly but settles. You step back, successful. Mr. Caldwell doesn't say thank you, but he doesn't yell either. That's practically affection. From the study you head toward the front parlor. It's the most decorative room in the house and, frankly, the most suspiciously unused. Reserved for guests, it's maintained with near religious zeal and dusted even when no one has stepped inside for weeks. This room contains a chandelier. It's low enough to threaten hats and high enough to frustrate every candle snuffer with a bad back. You eye it warily. It looks smug. You fetch the pole, long and wooden with a brass bell at the tip. Elijah carved a tiny smiling face into the handle. You smile back at it, because why not? One by one, you snuff the candles, extending the pole, twisting slightly, hearing the tiny sigh of flame surrendering. The room darkens slowly, like a stage closing after an unimpressive magic trick. You finish, lower the pole, and breathe. There's a rhythm to this job. Not glamorous. Not grand. But quiet, deliberate, and oddly satisfying. You once read, on a pamphlet used to prop open a window, that in some cities, there were night snuffers who roamed the streets, putting out public lamps to conserve oil. Boston had a few, especially during winter when nights stretched long and budgets stretched thin. Some were even paid by the snuff, which explains the overzealous extinguishing that once led to a public debate over premature darkness. You love that phrase. Premature darkness. Could be a poem. Back in the kitchen, Elijah appears, rubbing his eyes. He takes one look at you and says, "Chandelier again?" You nod. He pats your shoulder. Survived. You're officially a snuff master. You laugh softly. Do I get a badge? No, he says. But I'll carve you a better handle. Outside, the city is now fully awake. Vendors shout, carriages rumble, and somewhere a child is absolutely failing to sell molasses with any enthusiasm. You return your tools, wipe your hands, and exhale. The morning light is strong now, pouring through the windows and banishing whatever flickering shadows once curled in the corners. The lamps will burn again tonight. The candles too. You'll be there, powdering wigs or extinguishing flames, as always. But for now, there's tea. And a biscuit. And 10 minutes of stillness. You earned it. You never quite get used to how quiet wig dusting is. It's not the silence of solitude, but something more peculiar, a hush that seems to demand reverence, as if the wigs are old royalty, and you, their careful servant. You stand now at the small bench in the rear dressing room, where the late morning sun filters in through warped glass panes, casting gentle squares of warmth across your work surface. Today's client, Mr. Caldwell's court wig. Used for appearances in town meetings, court hearings, and the occasional dinner where people try to outbow one another. It is a towering piece of construction, frothy with loops and ridges, held together with stubborn pomade and quiet desperation. The curls, once pristine, are now sagging on the left side, like an ambitious cake that has lost its confidence. You reach for your comb, wooden, white-toothed, worn smooth with use, and begin coaxing life back into the hair. This is not real hair, of course. Most colonial wigs were made from horsehair or human hair imported from Europe. There were rumors, always rumors, about some wigs being made from the hair of prisoners or the indigent, but historians still argue whether those were slanderous gossip or part of an actual black market trade. You like to think this one came from a kind old Frenchman with impeccable curls who gave up his locks willingly in exchange for an unusually fine pastry. As you comb, the wig lets out tiny creaks, as if protesting the indignity of being rearranged after such noble service. A small puff of powder floats into the air and catches the light, glittering faintly before disappearing. You reach next for your powder brush, its bristles uneven but loyal. With a practiced wrist flick, you begin dusting. Not too much. You want statesman, not pastry ghost. Powdering is delicate work. Too little and the wig looks greasy. Too much and Mr. Caldwell will sneeze his way through half the town council. You recall last month's powdering mishap, which resulted in an explosive coughing fit and a long, awkward silence after Mr. Caldwell accused a fellow councilman of harboring overripe onions. The powder itself is your own blend. You're quite proud of it. Mostly rice flour, with a whisper of orris root for scent and a pinch of dried lavender. You used to use starch, but it clumped too much and attracted moths. Now your formula goes on smooth, smells pleasant, and, most importantly, causes minimal sneezing. There's a kind of artistry to wig dusting that few appreciate. The flick of the brush, the direction of the curls, the evenness of the powder. It's part grooming, part performance, and part restraint. You once saw an apprentice overpowder a wig so aggressively it fell off mid-conversation, trailing flour like a collapsing souffle. The memory still gives you a strange kind of joy. A gentle knock at the door. It's young Henry, Mr. Caldwell's nephew. He's 8, full of questions, and absolutely convinced that you possess magical powers. He peers in with wide eyes. "Are you fixing it?" he asks. "Yes," you reply. "It's having a bad curl day." Henry giggles, then tiptoes closer. "Can I touch it?" You nod and hold the wig low enough for him to poke gently. He does so with great ceremony, then looks up at you with reverence. "Do you name them?" You blink. "Name the wigs?" He nods solemnly. "I'd call this one Sir Pompington III. You grin. "That's dangerously dignified." Henry beams and runs off, no doubt to tell his nanny that you're conversing with nobility. Once alone again, you return to your work. A light spritz of rosewater from a pewter atomizer helps set the curls. It's a luxury, the rosewater, imported, subtle, and strictly rationed. You save it for important wigs and, on particularly bad days, your own pillow. You step back to admire your handiwork. Sir Pompington III now sits proudly on the wig stand, powdered, curled, and quietly judging the world once more. There's an odd comfort in this ritual. In a city that churns with politics, shifting loyalties, and the threat of revolution, the act of dusting wigs remains, stubbornly, almost absurdly, the same. Day in, day out? Powder, curl, repeat. Of course, not all powdered wigs were the same. Court wigs like this one were elaborate, towering, and often decorated with ribbon or lace. Simpler wigs, called tied wigs or bob wigs, were shorter and less fussy, worn by clerks, teachers, and those who wanted to appear respectable without investing in a tower of starch. Historians still debate whether wigs were universally adored or merely tolerated. There are letters from the period describing the headaches, the itching, the occasional infestation. And yet they remained, part symbol, part armor, part social contract. As you pack up your tools, you glance over at the spare wig, Mr. Caldwell's travel piece. It's shorter, plainer, and has a dent in the back where he once fell asleep in a carriage. You've tried to steam it out, but the dent persists. You've come to think of it as its personality. You carry Sir Pompington carefully to the dressing room, where Mr. Caldwell waits in a half-buttoned waistcoat and the kind of frown that suggests he's just remembered taxes exist. You lower the wig onto his head like a crown. He grunts, adjusts it slightly, and offers a single word, acceptable. You nod. High praise. As he leaves, you catch sight of yourself in the hallway mirror, face smudged with powder, hair tousled, sleeves rolled up. A ghost of your younger self flickers behind your eyes, the one who thought they'd grow up to be a poet or a blacksmith or perhaps someone who sold maps. And yet, here you are, brushing lavender into a politician's hairpiece. You don't regret it. Not really. Because in your quiet corner of Colonial Boston, where powder drifts like snow and rosewater softens even the stiffest fibers, you've found a kind of peace. It may not be fame, but it's care. And that counts for something. You step out of the house around midday, errands list in hand, your boots finally dry and your pockets powdered just enough to make you sneeze if you breathe too sharply. The streets of Colonial Boston are alive, muddied, and noisy in that wonderfully inefficient way cities always are when they're trying to become something greater than themselves. You dodge a cart full of eels, nod politely to a woman balancing a basket of candles on her head, and sidestep what might have been a puddle yesterday but now appears to be some sort of proto-soup. The air is thick with wood smoke, roasted chestnuts, and the occasional waft of old fish, the scent of which seems to attach itself to your coat without asking permission. Your first stop is Mr. Blanchard's shop. the local supplier of wax, snuffing bells, and various other tools of light management. The building leans a little to the left, as if unsure about participating in capitalism. You push open the crooked door, greeted by a pleasant mixture of beeswax, old leather, and floorboard complaints. Mr. Blanchard himself is behind the counter, eyes peering over a pair of spectacles that have not sat properly on his face since 1752. "Ah," he says, looking you up and down. "More snuffers?" "More oil, actually. And a new wick trimmer." Elijah blunted the last one trying to cut a goose feather. Mr. Blanchard chuckles. "That boy still thinks a wick's the same as a quill." He bustles into the back, calling over his shoulder, "You know, back when I started, we used to snuff candles with damp fingers." You blink. "Your own fingers?" "Oh yes. Lost hair on 3 knuckles. Made me fast, though." Historians still argue whether finger snuffing was ever widespread or simply the mark of a young man with something to prove and poor impulse control. What is documented, however, is the evolution of candle snuffing tools, from simple pinchers to elaborately crafted silver bells used by aristocratic households to extinguish flames in style. Mr. Blanchard returns with a small parcel wrapped in waxed cloth. He slides it across the counter with a grunt of satisfaction. "There's your trimmer. New design. Cut smooth. Doesn't insult the candle on its way out." You thank him, leave a few coins, and head back into the bustle. Next stop, Mrs. Everly's shop, where you purchase a small tin of lemon-scented starch for wig emergencies and a spool of lavender ribbon for guest wig enhancements. She throws in a piece of peppermint bark because you once helped her niece remove ink stains from a bonnet. Favors mean more than coin, here. You loop back toward the Caldwell house with your parcels, only to find Elijah waiting outside, looking deeply annoyed at a lantern bracket. "Look at this," he says, gesturing. "Bent clean forward like it's bowing to the neighbors." You tilt your head. "You think it did that on purpose?" "It's mocking me." The bracket has indeed sagged, causing the lantern to dangle like a tired eyelid. You both know who'll fix it. You fetch a stool, some wire, and the long hook used for adjusting ceiling lamps. As you work, a small crowd gathers, 2 passing merchants, a woman with a dog too small to respect, and a boy selling apples that may or may not be last week's. "Careful now," Elijah murmurs, holding the base of the stool. "Remember when you nearly concussed yourself trying to rehang that dining room taper? I remember you laughing about it for a week. It was a very dignified fall." You adjust the bracket carefully, twisting wire into a makeshift brace. The lantern rights itself, no longer embarrassed to exist. The crowd disperses, disappointed that you didn't fall again. You climb down, wipe your hands, and stretch. Your back reminds you that this is not the first time today you've bent over a fiddly task in the service of domestic tranquility. There's something curious about these little beauties, the snuffing, the polishing, the curling and trimming and coaxing of wax and hair. They feel inconsequential on their own, like footnotes in a diary. But stacked together, day after day, they form the quiet spine of the household. Of the city, really. Because for all the speeches and revolutions and well-known names, someone still had to trim the wick in the council chamber. Someone still had to powder the wig before the mayor's meeting. Someone still had to fix the lantern bracket so visitors didn't trip and sue. You and Elijah sit on the stoop for a moment. No one says anything. It's not quite a break, but it's something adjacent. A breeze rolls through the alley, lifting stray petals from a nearby herb stand and sending them twirling across the cobblestones. For a second, the street smells like mint and bay leaf instead of smoke and ambition. Elijah exhales. "You ever think about switching jobs?" You shrug. "To what?" "Town crier, maybe. Get to yell for a living. I'd mix up the proclamations." "True. We'd have people showing up to the wrong hangings." You both laugh, softly. Carefully. The kind of laugh you earn after a morning of patching a world that never stays fixed. You head back inside with your parcels. Mr. Caldwell is out, attending something that requires him to look dignified and mildly bored, so you sneak in a brief reorganization of the supply cupboard. Powder tins sorted by scent. Ribbons separated by width. candle molds stacked in order of optimism. You unroll the new wick trimmer. It glints faintly, proud and precise. You test it on a stubby practice wick. Clean cut. No fray. You might write a poem about it later. Outside, the bells begin to chime the hour. Lunch for some. Work's halfway point for others. For you, it's a brief window of peace before the afternoon wigs need airing and the parlor candles need attending. You sit by the window with your cup of watered cider, watching the street lean into midday with all the grace of a horse trying to curtsy. And you think, as you sip, that maybe there's poetry in maintenance. In care. Not everything has to be grand to matter. Sometimes it just has to be dusted. The afternoon begins with a sneeze, not yours, but Mr. Caldwell's, which echoes through the house with the resonance of a cannon and the emotional energy of someone betrayed by linen. You freeze mid-step on the stairs, one hand still holding a folded cloth meant for wig buffing. The second sneeze confirms it. Something has gone wrong with the powder. You rush to the study. There he stands, in his favorite chair, wearing his formal wig like a man about to file a lawsuit against gravity. His eyes are red-rimmed, and he holds a lace handkerchief as if it personally offended him. This powder, he says, sniffing violently, has a tang. You blink. A tang, sir? A citrus overtone. It is indecorous. You make a mental note never to use lemon starch on a warm day again. It seems the scent activated under stress, giving off a subtle note of early orchard. You lower your head in apology, inwardly composing a haiku about the dangers of overly ambitious wig maintenance. I shall wear the travel piece today, Mr. Caldwell declares, as though this constitutes real punishment. You retrieve it quickly, still dented, still modest, and now oddly comforting in its imperfection. He allows you to swap them silently, muttering about the betrayal of servants and frivolous aromas. Once he leaves, likely off to deliver stern declarations about shipping tariffs, you sit for a moment at the foot of the stairs and breathe. It's not the worst wig-related incident you've seen. That title still belongs to the magistrate's wig that caught fire during a passionate, anti-smuggling speech. The incident is now known locally as the Flaming Ruling. You take a moment to tidy the study, noticing the tiny flakes of powder that have settled on Mr. Caldwell's desk. A whisper of lemon still lingers in the air, clean, cheerful, and entirely unwelcome. Back in the servants' corridor, Elijah leans out of the pantry. What's with the noise? Citrus mutiny, you reply. He grins. Knew you were getting fancy. I was going for subtle sophistication. He snorts. You delivered fruit basket. That afternoon, you return to your post in the parlor to prepare the lamps for evening. The chandelier, yes, that chandelier, awaits, and while it doesn't actually taunt you, you could swear it glows a little smugger each time you pass. This time, though, you're trying something different. Mr. Blanchard's new wick trimmer works like a charm. Crisp cuts, no bending, no unraveling. You trim each wick carefully, collect the stubs, and place them in the wax collection tin. Nothing goes to waste. The wax will be melted down later, mixed with new tallow, and reborn as another stubby candle for the laundry room or cellar. It's during these moments of quiet, standing beneath a flickering sconce with tools in your apron and soot on your sleeve, that you realize just how many small rituals your work includes. Each lamp tells a story. The one in the hallway burns faster on windy nights. The study lamp sputters if filled too quickly. The parlor chandelier has one taper that never quite aligns with the rest, always slightly askew, as if expressing mild defiance. Historians still debate whether household servants in colonial Boston were trained formally in these trades, wig care, lamp maintenance, or whether knowledge passed from one exhausted soul to another. Some households kept detailed notebooks of lighting schedules and wig powder recipes. Others relied on the institutional memory of people like you, who just knew which curls drooped in humidity and which wick burned longer when trimmed on a slant. Back in the pantry, you polish the spare snuffer. It's a little one, about the size of a plum, and perfectly weighted. A luxury item, really, and mostly unused. Still, you shine it carefully, knowing that beauty sometimes matters even in tools no one sees. You pull the guest wig from its shelf. Poor thing hasn't been worn in weeks. It's listing to one side like a drunken violinist. You fluff it with a comb, spritz a tiny cloud of neutral powder, and add just a touch of blue ribbon behind the ear. Not because anyone will see it, but because you need it to feel loved. In the courtyard, you spot Henry again. He's dragging a small wooden cart filled with rocks and pointing at various weeds like a tiny tax assessor. He calls up to you. Are you working on Sir Pompington? Retiring him for the day, you say. He's emotionally exhausted. Henry nods seriously. Sometimes I get like that too. He wanders off, humming a song that may or may not be about tax codes and pirate goats. You sit for a moment longer, watching the sky soften from bright glare to something dustier, almost lavender in tone. The long shadows return, stretching across cobblestones, and with them comes the gentle rustle of evening duties. The lamps are ready. The wigs are safe. The house exhales again. You return to the entry hall, where Elijah is prepping for the final round of snuffing. He's lined up his tools like a surgeon: trimmer, snuffer bell, wick puller, backup wick puller, and a tiny pouch of beeswax pellets for patching. He looks at you with the solemn pride of a man preparing to extinguish with dignity. You coming with me for the rounds? He asks. Of course. You move room to room, dimming the house together. The study is first. Then the parlor. Then the lesser-used back stair, which always smells faintly of pickles and disappointment. Each flame dims, each room softens, until the whole house settles into that gentle half-light, the in-between state that only exists in places built before the invention of switches. By the time you reach the upper hallway, it's almost full dark. A single candle remains, the guest room taper. Elijah steps aside. Your turn. You raise the snuffer, hover over the flickering flame, and pause. Then, with a quiet motion, you lower it. Pfft. Gone. Another day, tucked in gently. Another wig, another wick, another quiet triumph. You begin your morning the next day in the marketplace, on an errand that no one else wanted, fetching a new powder sieve and more comb wax. The city hums with the low thrum of foot traffic and hawking vendors. Everyone is out, it seems, women elbowing over turnips, children chasing chickens with limited success, and two old men arguing about whether clams or oysters are more morally upright. You sidestep a runaway cabbage and make your way toward the stall of Mr. Norridge, a wiry gentleman with eyebrows so unruly they appear to be seeking independence. His booth is a cramped paradise of powders, brushes, oils, and the occasional questionable tonic, to banish melancholy and dandruff. One label cheerfully promises. Ah, Norridge says, recognizing you. Need the usual? Yes, you say, and a new sieve. The last one collapsed mid-dusting. There was an incident. He cackles. Too much enthusiasm, not enough mesh. Happens to the best of us. You eye the selection. Wooden frames, finely woven mesh stretched tight, and even one with an ivory handle that looks like it costs more than your month's wages. You go for a sturdy, sensible one with no ambitions beyond reliable sifting. Norridge wraps it carefully, tossing in a small sample tin for the trouble. A newer blend, he explains, made with cornstarch, white clay, and the faintest essence of violet. You thank him and make your way home, stepping around a trio of goats, who have no regard for your errands. When you return to the Caldwell house, Elijah is sitting on the back steps, carefully oiling a pair of wick trimmers. He looks up, nods at the bundle under your arm. New toys? Fresh sieve. No more powder avalanches. Shame, he says. I like that sneezy chaos. Felt dramatic. You sit beside him. The sun is warm, and for a moment, there's nothing to do but enjoy the stillness, a rare currency in this city of constant motion. After tea, you retreat to the wig room to test the new sieve. You position a freshly washed wig on its stand, Mr. Caldwell's court piece again, in need of refreshment after yesterday's citrus disaster, and begin to sift. The new sieve is a dream. The powder falls like snowfall, slow and even, catching the light just enough to make the room feel like a snow globe of faintly floral dust. You hum a tune as you work, An old sailor's lullaby you picked up from a former footman who once tried to flee to Nova Scotia and got as far as Portsmouth. As you buff the powder in with your cloth, you notice something tucked behind the wig stand, a faded slip of parchment. Curious, you unfold it. It's a note. Or perhaps a poem. For the curls we coax, the powder we trust. To keep men's vanity from gathering dust. There's no signature. Just a tiny pressed violet, dried flat and delicate. You smile. You're not the first to find poetry in wig work. And probably not the last. You stash the note gently in your apron and head downstairs, where the midday bustle has given way to the afternoon lull. The house breathes differently in this light, slower, more contemplative, as though even the walls are beginning to nap. Elijah has set up a small repair station in the hallway, repairing a snap snuffer bell handle. The brass piece split last night, likely from overuse or from being enthusiastically twirled by a bored Henry. Needs repining, he mutters. You nod, watching him tap it gently into place. The bell is a delicate thing, small but precisely weighted to extinguish flame without disturbing the wax. An overzealous snuffer might create a crater in the candle, leading to lopsided burns and eventual meltdown. Literally and socially. Some households had ornate snuffers, silver or pewter, engraved with family crests or biblical quotes. The Caldwell snuffers are plainer, but reliable. One has a tiny dent where Elijah once dropped it trying to dodge an ambitious moth. You help polish them once they're repaired, working in rhythm. The tin of beeswax polish smells faintly of honey and something sharper, bay leaf, maybe. You buff in slow circles, watching the metal gleam back to life. It's easy to forget, sometimes, that these tools are what stand between civilized order and chaotic darkness. Before gas lamps and matches, before the easy flick of a light switch, there were people like you. Holding flame. Managing suit. Ensuring the light flickered where it should and didn't where it mustn't. Historians still argue whether bell snuffers were formally trained or simply apprenticed through patient repetition. You've certainly learned by doing. By trial. By singed sleeve and awkward lesson. In the afternoon, a knock at the door, unexpected. It's the neighbor's housepa, wide-eyed and out of breath. Their drawing-room wig has collapsed. Guests are expected within the hour. You exchange a glance with Elijah, grab your kit, and follow the boy down the block. The neighbor's house is grander than the Caldwells but colder. The servants' stairs creak, and the drawing-room smells faintly of too many roses. The wig in question sits on a carved stand, a deflated monument to former glory. You assess the damage, collapsed curls, powder residue clumped in sweaty ridges, and what appears to be an ink stain near the back. Elbowed the inkstand, sir, the boy explains nervously. Then panicked. You nod solemnly. That's fair. You get to work. Combs first, teasing the curls back into place. Powder next, carefully applied through your new sieve, watching the transformation from frazzled to stately. You use the corner of your apron to dab at the ink, lifting it gently with vinegar and prayer. 30 minutes later, the wig looks noble again. Slightly shorter in the back, yes, but with the air of someone who meant to do that. You return to the Caldwell house to find Elijah asleep on the stoop, snuffer tools still in his lap. You nudge him gently with your toe. Heroes welcome? He mumbles. Just tea. He nods. Even better. You sit beside him again, watching the street. A cart full of vegetables lumbers by. A man yells cheerfully about cod. Someone's dog barks at a pigeon with incredible optimism. The light shifts again. Shadows stretch. Candles will be lit soon. You think about the pressed violet. About the poem. About all the anonymous hands that have fluffed wigs and trimmed wicks and polished the little pieces of history that rarely get remembered. You add your hands to theirs. And return, once more, to the quiet art of care. The evening settles over Boston like a soft wool cloak, thick, a little scratchy, and stitched with good intentions. Your back inside, sleeves rolled, the quiet duties of twilight unfurling in front of you like a well-worn checklist. Light the hallway sconces. Inspect the guest wig, which Henry has tried to dress with quill feathers again, and ensure no one sets their coat on fire in the hearth room. Elijah is already midway through his own checklist. His lamp trimming kit laid out like a surgeon's, his expression one of exaggerated seriousness. The new trimmer's nice, he mutters, peering down at a stubborn wick. Makes the wick feel like it's in good hands. You're too attached, you say? It has a handle grip, he replies, as if that's proof of lifelong loyalty. You leave him to his love affair with copper tools and head toward the front of the house, where the family is gathering for dinner. Your task, wig vigilance. Tonight, Mr. Caldwell wears the travel piece again, still dented, still dependable. You adjust it gently before he enters the dining room, brushing back a stray curl that has begun its slow migration toward the soup. Don't fuss, he mutters. Wouldn't dream of it, sir. Across the room, his wife is wearing her own powdered arrangement, a modest affair of tight curls and 3 velvet pins that somehow form the shape of a ship. It bobs gently as she walks, and you stifle a smile. That's her favorite wig, Marigold, she once whispered when she caught you admiring it. Every good wig has a name. Dinner passes with the usual sounds, clinking cutlery, quiet disagreement about sugar tariffs, Henry pretending to faint into his soup. Through the door, you catch muffled laughter from the kitchen. The staff eats in shifts, perched on stools and barrels, whispering gossip in between bites of beef pie. Later, when the family retires, you sneak into the now empty dining room to extinguish the candles. The long table still glows, a dozen flames trembling atop half-melted tapers. You reach for the snuffer bell and begin the ceremony. One by one, you lower the bell, hold it steady, and watch the flame vanish with a sound no louder than a sigh. Each candle extinguished feels like folding a page, closing a chapter. There's a rhythm to it, step, lower, snuff, exhale. It becomes almost meditative. In the corner of the room stands a small writing desk, Mrs. Caldwell's. You pass by it every day and never touch it, but tonight something catches your eye. A tiny bottle of wig scent, rose and chamomile, left open beside her blotter. You take a quick whiff and feel oddly soothed, like the scent alone could tame a difficult curl. Historians still argue whether wig scents were purely fashionable, or if they served a more practical purpose. Some claim they masked unpleasant odors in crowded drawing rooms. Others believe they were a quiet status symbol, like wearing silk-lined gloves or owning a snuffer engraved with your initials. In this house, at least, it's a bit of both. The Caldwells are proud of their wigs. Proud enough to scent them, powder them, and, on one occasion, transport one in its own box during a day trip to Cambridge. Back in the hallway, you find Elijah polishing the sconces. I saw Henry sticking marzipan to the guest wig again, he says casually. You groan. He claims it's a ceremonial upgrade. He's 8, you reply. He also claims the cat speaks French. You head to the wig room and sure enough, there's a sticky glob nestled in the curls of the guest piece. You groan again. This wig has seen indignities no hairpiece should endure: damp storage, moth threats, accidental candle collisions, and now dessert-based decoration. You set to work removing the marzipan with a damp cloth and the patience of a saint. The curls fluff slightly, grateful to be liberated from almond sugar captivity. I'm renaming this one, you mutter. Elijah pokes his head in. What's its name now? Probably Regret. Maybe Sir Guington. He grins and disappears down the hall. You finish your repairs and place the wig back on its stand. It's looking proud again, maybe a little sticky in the back, but nothing a quick powder tomorrow won't fix. As night deepens, you return to your quarters, more alcove than room, tucked just behind the pantry. You light a single stubby candle and stretch your legs beneath the thin blanket. Your boots are off, your shirt is unbuttoned at the neck, and you have exactly 1 square of candied ginger tucked away as a reward for surviving another day of powdered diplomacy. The candle flickers. You watch it for a while, admiring how the wax pulls and curls, how the light dances on the wall in soft waves. There's something about flame that makes you think. About time, about people, about the 100 tiny things we do each day just to keep everything from falling apart. Wig dusters and bell snuffers. Ribbon arrangers and oil trimmers. Invisible workers making the world just a little less chaotic. You remember, faintly, your first week in this house, fumbling with the powder tin, elbowing a sconce by accident, getting lost between the front room and the pantry because the hallway turned when you weren't looking. Elijah had found you in the linen closet, mumbling to a pile of tablecloths. Now you could navigate this house in the dark. Sometimes you do. You blow out your candle. The room sighs into darkness. Outside, the city rustles in its sleep. Somewhere, a cart creaks over cobbles. A dog barks, half-hearted. A distant bell chimes the hour. And here you are, one more soul in a house full of quiet work, where flames are managed, wigs are fluffed, and even the smallest jobs shine with meaning. You close your eyes. And drift. Morning returns not with sunlight but with the thump of Elijah's boot against your doorframe. A polite knock, in his language. You groan, squinting at the faint light leaking through the curtainless window, and roll upright, one sock still half on and your blanket twisted around your ankle like a needy ghost. Big day, Elijah says, already chewing something that crunches like judgment. What kind of day? Inspection day. Ah. The words land like a cold slap of dishwater. Inspection day means two things. First, the Caldwell's slightly terrifying cousin, Miss Wickers, is arriving from Providence. Second, the wigs and lamps must be spotless, blindingly spotless, as she is known for noticing blemishes in both wax and moral fiber. You dress quickly, pulling on your cleanest apron and shaking a bit of powder from your sleeve before heading down to the kitchen. Mrs. Keene has already set out hard rolls and judgmental stares. You grab a roll. It cracks like old parchment. She arrives at noon, she announces. She'll expect the house to smell of civility and moral rectitude. Do we stock that? You ask, chewing. We have lavender and vinegar. Pretend. You and Elijah split the morning tasks. He handles the hallway sconces and any visibly tilted candle holders. You handle the wigs. All of them. The guest wig, of course, is still recovering from its encounter with Henry's marzipan ambitions. The curls are less sticky now, but the back still holds a slight almond essence. You begin with Sir Pompington, Mr. Caldwell's court wig and the most dignified of the lot. You fluff, powder, comb, and recurl the loops with a warm iron, singing under your breath to keep time. The powder goes on smoothly today. Your new sieve is proving itself worthy, and the curls bounce slightly, as though pleased with their own importance. Next, the travel piece. Still dented, still reliable. You consider re-steaming the back but decide against it. The dent gives it character. A man with a perfectly smooth wig seems a bit too suspicious, like he's hiding something behind all that symmetry. Mrs. Caldwell's ship wig is next. Marigold, as she calls it, is a delicate arrangement of tight curls, small velvet ribbons, and a miniature comb stuck firmly in the side. It takes longer to refresh, so many tiny parts to respect, but you finish with a gentle mist of rosewater and a whisper of blue powder to give it a subtle shimmer. Historians still debate whether colored powder was widely used or reserved for the fashion-forward elite. Some letters from the period mention light blues, pinks, even subtle greens, mostly for balls or theatrical events. But in this house, blue is acceptable as long as it whispers, not shouts. By late morning, the wigs are pristine. You lay them out on their stands like judges awaiting a case. Elijah appears in the doorway. She's here, he says. Has a hat shaped like a pagoda. I think it's armed. You wipe your hands, straighten your apron, and follow him. Miss Wickers is precisely as advertised. Tall, thin, with sharp eyes and a voice like overpolished silver. Her hat indeed resembles a small structure, wooden beams and all. You're not convinced it isn't housing birds. She sweeps into the front hall and inspects everything at once. Floorboards. Cornices. You. Her gaze lingers. You are the wigman, she says. You nod, unsure if she's accusing or impressed. Are these your dustings? They are. She walks past the wig stand slowly, eyes narrowed. She pauses at the travel wig, runs one gloved finger gently down the curl line, and sniffs. Reliable, she says. You blink. Yes, ma'am. And what scent? Lavender. With a hint of rice starch and rose leaf. She considers this. Sensible. Frivolity is contagious. She moves on. You exhale. After her tour, she disappears into the parlor with Mrs. Caldwell, leaving behind the faint smell of clothes and mystery. You and Elijah retreat to the back corridor, where you both slump against the wall in post-judgment relief. She didn't mention the sconces, he says. That means they passed. She did eye the chandelier like it owed her money. She eyes everything like it owes her money. You both laugh, then lapse into silence. The kind of silence that follows great battles or particularly fussy brunches. In the afternoon, Mr. Caldwell emerges from the study, triumphant. She says the wigs were the only things that didn't disappoint her. You nod with pride, brushing a bit of powder from your sleeve. She also says you used a mature scent palette. Elijah grins. That's wig praise of the highest order. The rest of the day passes in a hum of minor adjustments. One of the hallway sconces has come loose, again, and Elijah tightens it with his patented method of muttering threats at the screws. You refill the oil lamps with the last of the winter blend, noting that the spring shipment needs ordering. In the evening, you return to the wig room and find Henry waiting by the stands, staring up at them with awe. Which one's the bravest? He asks. You consider. Sir Pompington's the most experienced. Marigold's the cleverest. But the travel wig, he's been through the most. Henry nods solemnly. I want to be like him. You want to be dented? I want to be dependable. You ruffle his hair. That's better. Before bed, you polish the snuffers one last time. The brass gleams under candlelight. You organize the powder tins, sweep the wig room floor, and straighten the ribbons. Everything in its place. Everything cared for. Historians may not record your name. The archives may not preserve your tools. But someone will see the sheen of a polished snuffer, the even fall of a powdered curl, and know, someone did this with care. You snuff the last candle. The room sighs into darkness. And once again, the house rests. Rain arrives just before dawn, soft at first, like a sigh over the rooftops, then heavier, more decisive, soaking through cobbled streets, and wringing out the sky like an oversteeped tea bag. You wake to the familiar drip of a leaky eave outside your window and the scent of damp wool from your coat, which you foolishly left hanging near the hearth. Rain in Boston isn't rare, but it carries with it a sense of sluggishness. People move slower, cloaks become heavier, and wigs become something altogether tragic. You swing your legs from the cot and wince as your toes find the cold floor. No fire yet. The kitchen hasn't stirred. Even Elijah is uncharacteristically silent. You know this because his usual morning clatter of boot heels and humming off-key sea shanties has been replaced with nothing but the pitter-patter of rain and a faint snore from somewhere near the pantry. You pull on your trousers, shrug into your coat, and pad softly to the rear stairs, passing the guest wig room where the morning light, or what little of it makes it through the gray, casts all the powdered pieces in a ghostly glow. Sir Pompington looks sullen. The travel wig appears damp, despite being indoors. And Marigold, regal as ever, seems to be silently judging the weather. You descend to the scullery, where Mrs. Keene is already standing over the stove, stirring something thick and beige and capable of feeding a small army. Rain's been up since midnight, she says without turning. Smells like paste, you reply, sniffing the pot. Because it is paste, she says flatly. Porridge paste. For patching wigs? You blink. She gestures to the shelf beside her, where a modest row of old wigs sits lined up like students in detention. Each one is misshapen from years of poor storage, candle smoke, and dampness. On a wet day like this, some will be brought back into service to spare the fancier pieces. Ah, you say. The emergency squad. She grunts. One gust of wind today and Marigold's ship will sail off her head. You take a bowl of porridge paste and your kit upstairs, where Elijah is inspecting a hallway lamp that has begun dripping wax in a slightly accusatory way. It's not happy, he says, poking the base. Nothing is, you reply, lifting the lamp to examine the wick. Even the wigs look nervous. He nods solemnly. Rain gets in their curls. Makes them sulk. You both split the morning work. While Elijah checks for leaks and oils hinges that only creak when the house is upset, you begin the real labor, tending to wigs and weather. This is not for the faint of heart. Rain, you see, flattens wigs. It saps the powder, weighs down the curls, and causes starch to rebel in odd, crinkly angles. The effect is less respected magistrate and more damp accordion. You start with the travel piece, bravest of them all. The dent at the back, usually charming, now looks sullen and accusatory. You dab gently with a cloth and fluff with care, applying a layer of porridge paste in place of standard powder. It's a trick from an old barrister you once worked for, who swore by it during court appearances in foggy weather. Next, Marigold. You hover over her like a priest. The velvet pins are soggy, one of the ribbon sails has drooped, and the curls at the base have begun to curl inward, forming what you can only describe as an accusatory scowl. You'll be fine, you whisper. She doesn't look convinced. You repin her sails, gently warm the velvet with a pocket-heated ironstone, and carefully tease the curls back into place. A faint whiff of rosewater lingers, along with just the barest note of yesterday's lemon starch, less offensive now, softened by damp air and time. You leave her to rest beneath a bell jar, letting the humidity even out while you move on to the backups. The emergency squad is a motley bunch, one powdered too much, one curled too little, and one that smells faintly of clothes and regret. You sort through them like a wig surgeon choosing which patient is most viable. Elijah passes the door with a snuffer pole under one arm. You know, he says, one good gust of wind, and we'll be chasing ribbons through the square. I'm ready, you reply. Wignet's in my pocket. Truly heroic. The rain picks up again, tapping steadily on the window panes as if reminding everyone that powdered hair and ambition are no match for wet weather. You remember a story once told by a retired footman about a judge's wig that blew off during a speech and landed in a bowl of chowder. The judge, without missing a beat, had scooped it out, wrung it dry, and slapped it back on, declaring, the law, like chowder, must be served hot and without apology. Historians still argue whether that story ever happened or if it's one of those legends built from truth, exaggeration, and a pinch of theatrical seasoning. But you like to believe it. You always have. Just before noon, the rain softens, fading into mist. Mr. Caldwell appears in the hallway, peering out the front window as if waiting for a duel. I shall need the court wig, he says. You hesitate. It's damp, you reply carefully. He sighs. Then, the dented one. You fetch it, freshly fluffed and bolstered with porridge paste, and lower it onto his head. He nods in approval, silent, stoic, and slightly adhesive around the temples. Will it hold? He asks. It will persevere. He strides out the door, cloak flapping dramatically. You watch him vanish down the steps, the rain forming halos in his wake. The rest of the day is spent in triage. Drying, padding, repinning, reheating ironstones, and catching two ribbon pieces that attempt to defect in the drawing room. Henry appears at one point with an idea for a wig umbrella, consisting of string, twine, and a doll's parasol. You thank him for his innovation, but decline to field test it today. By early evening, the rain has lifted. The air smells clean, the wigs are dry once more, and even the emergency squad has earned a bit of dignity. You sit by the window, polishing your tools, sipping weak cider, and watching the last drops trail down the glass like hesitant punctuation. The day did not go as planned. But the wigs endured. So did you. And tomorrow, no doubt, there will be curls to fluff, wicks to trim, and another gust of wind with opinions of its own. By morning, the sun has finally returned, pale and watery, but undeniably present, casting long ribbons of light through the hallway windows like a quiet apology for yesterday's downpour. You wake up to the rare sensation of warmth on your cheek and the even rarer joy of boots that are no longer damp. Outside, Boston stirs with renewed optimism. Carts creak, shutters bang open, and the neighborhood rooster, who sounds like he's been gargling gravel, delivers his usual off-key aria. You stretch, yawn, and sit up slowly, already thinking of the day ahead. Today is a restocking day. The candles need replenishing, the powder stores are low, and you've been meaning to replace the broken wig stand that Henry tried to use as a jousting pole. You grab your satchel and apron, greet Elijah with a nod, he's already elbow-deep in lamp oil, and set off into the brisk morning air. The market square is livelier than it's been in days. Rain-washed streets gleam under the early light, and vendors holler their wares with fresh gusto: oysters, ribbons, ginger cakes, cheap combs, and a suspiciously large wheel of cheese being carried by two boys with more enthusiasm than coordination. You head for your first stop, Mrs. Renfield's Candlery. The shop smells of beeswax and rosemary, with racks of hand-dipped tapers lined up like soldiers. Mrs. Renfield greets you with a knowing smile. "You need the usual?" she asks, reaching for a bundle before you even reply. "Twice the usual. The parlor chandelier's been burning like it's on trial." She chuckles, wrapping the bundle in linen. "Heard the Caldwells had visitors. The kind who notice if one candle burns faster than the others." You grin. "Precisely the kind." You pay in coin and courtesy, promise to return before the month's end, and head on to your next stop, Mr. Griggs, purveyor of fine wig stands and less fine conversation. Griggs is leaning against his shop front, smoking a pipe shaped like a pineapple and staring at nothing in particular. "Ah, the snuffer's apprentice returns," he says. "I'm no apprentice." You carry the wax tin like one. You glance down. He's not wrong. "I need a new wig stand," you say. "One with more dignity than splinters." He grunts and disappears into the shop. A few moments later, he emerges with two options, one oak, one ash. The oak is sturdier. The ash has a flourish at the base that looks like someone tried to carve a duck and gave up halfway. You choose the oak. Griggs wraps it up, then adds a small packet of wig powder for flair, which you're fairly certain is just scented flour. You thank him and continue on. Back at the house, Elijah has laid out the candles for trimming. He inspects your new wig stand with approval. No more jousting mishaps, then? Not unless Henry finds a second one. Together, you prep the evening's taper supply. Each candle is measured, cut if needed, and base melted for secure seating in the brass holders. It's quiet work, warm and rhythmical. The scent of fresh wax mixes with the faint lavender in your apron pocket. As you work, Elijah shares the latest servant gossip. The Tremonts down the street have hired a French valet who supposedly styles wigs with ribbons soaked in wine. Mrs. Talbot's cook was caught dusting her master's wig with cocoa powder in a moment of desperate improvisation. And someone, no one knows who, has been leaving snuffer bells in unexpected places, like pockets and pie tins. Historians still debate how seriously wig fashion influenced household power dynamics. Did a well-kept wig reflect a competent staff? Or was it the other way around, a sort of wearable report card for those behind the scenes? It's hard to say, but in your experience, a household with tidy curls and even burns tends to have fewer slammed doors. Later that day, Mr. Caldwell announces that he'll be attending a winter luncheon, a gathering of merchants and minor officials to discuss imports, which you suspect really means eat too much and argue about molasses. He requests the travel wig. Again. You sigh internally, fetch it from its stand, and give it one last gentle dusting. The dent is still there, of course, charming now, almost an inside joke between you and the wig. You fit it onto Mr. Caldwell's head with care, adjusting the ribbon tie under his chin. "Will it hold?" he asks. "It's faced worse," you reply. He seems satisfied with that and departs, leaving a faint scent of starch and self-importance in his wake. You take the rest of the day to reorganize the powder supplies. Your newest tin, from Griggs, does indeed appear to be glorified flour, so you label it for emergencies and cupcakes only and stash it accordingly. As you dust the shelves and polish the combs, Henry wanders in. "Can I help?" he asks, holding a wooden spoon. "Only if you promise not to invent anything today." He nods solemnly. "I'm just here to observe. Like a scientist." You let him observe the sorting of ribbons, and even allow him to polish a wig comb under supervision. He manages not to break anything, which you consider a rousing success. At twilight, you return to the hallway sconces for your evening round of lighting. The fresh candles slide in perfectly. The flint strikes true, The flames catch, flicker, and glow steadily, obedient and warm, like polite guests at a dinner party. You walk the house in slow circles, lighting here, adjusting there. Each flicker feels like a small nod of approval. Even the chandelier, often moody and overambitious, seems to behave. When Mr. Caldwell returns, suit rumpled, Wiggs slightly asks you, he seems satisfied. Productive luncheon? You ask. They serve pickled eel, he says darkly. Nothing else matters. You help him remove the travel wig, smoothing the curls, brushing out the city's opinions. Then you place it gently back on its stand. Later, in your quarters, you sit beside your candle, notebook open, pen in hand. You write one line. A good wig, like a good day, survives what it must. Then you set down your pen, blow out your candle, and slip into the hush that waits between today and tomorrow. The next morning starts with a mop bucket, a missing shoe, and what Elijah calls a mutiny of minor importance. It begins, as many crises do, with Henry. You're in the pantry organizing the powder tins when he bursts in, red-faced and out of breath, clutching what appears to be a kitchen apron tied like a cape. They're striking, he announces. You blink. Who? The dusters. You blink again. What dusters? The wig dusters. You follow him through the back hallway and into the wig room, where a rather pathetic protest is underway. 4 wig stands have been laid on their sides. One is wearing your discarded cravat as a headband, and someone, likely Henry, has painted a shaky sign that reads "No more dust or bust." Elijah leans in the doorway, arms folded, biting back a grin. Well, he says, looks like the powder has risen up. You stare at the chaos. Marigold has been turned backwards, as if in symbolic silence. The travel wig's den has been lightly stuffed with bread. Sir Pompington's curls have been rearranged to spell what might be a rude word in Latin. Henry beams proudly. They have demands. Such as? Less brushing. More breaks. No powder that smells like library. You pinch the bridge of your nose. This, you think, is what happens when children are allowed too much marzipan. Rather than undo the scene immediately, you fetch a chair and sit across from the protesters. Well, you say, what do the Whigs want in exchange for a return to their stands? Henry considers. Hot comb privileges. Occasional ribbons. No more citrus. You nod thoughtfully. Fair. You strike a deal. 1 extra polish session per week, a small cedar drawer for ribbon storage, and an official wig appreciation hour each month, to be observed silently. Elijah makes a show of writing this on a notepad, which he flips shut with theatrical flair. Peace has been negotiated, he announces. With that, you and Henry gently lift each wig back to its upright dignity. The cravat is removed. The bread is salvaged, mostly. Order is restored. Historians still argue whether domestic servants in the colonial period had humor about their work. Records tend to overlook daily mischief, but in your experience, humor is as vital to the job as oil and combs. When you spend your days fluffing another man's hairpiece and trimming candle wicks for people who complain about shadows, you either laugh or go slowly mad. The rest of the morning is spent recovering from the Great Whig Rebellion. Elijah takes stock of the snuffer poles, inspecting for splinters or bent bells. You wash the bread crumbs out of Sir Pompington's left curl. Mrs. Keene, hearing of the incident, offers you a biscuit and a wink. By mid-afternoon, calm has returned. The household hums with routine again. Powder tins are back in order, the travel wig is lounging under its dust cloth, and Henry is pretending to be a magistrate with a feather quill and a very serious expression. You step outside for a moment of air. The sun is bright, and Boston's rooftops glow like overturned spoons. You wander around the back of the house, where the laundry dries and the kitchen garden grows under the hopeful eye of an elderly gardener who talks to parsley. Elijah joins you, holding a snuffer pole like a cane. So, he says, what'll we do when the candles start striking? Hide, you reply. Fair. You both laugh, then sit on the stoop, watching a cart full of firewood lurch past the alleyway. The scent of pine and soot fills the air. You ever think about doing something else? Elijah asks suddenly. You glance at him. Like what? I dunno. Traveling. Starting your own shop. Writing a book of powder formulas. You think about that. A tiny powder shop on a quiet street. Bell snuffers hung above the door like wind chimes. Shelves of scented starch and curling combs. A sign out front that reads, Curl and Flame, for hair and hearth. Maybe, you say? Someday. He nods. You'd be good at it. You smile. So would you. Back inside, the dinner hour approaches. Mrs. Caldwell enters the parlor wearing marigold, freshly restored to her full splendor. The ship motif has been enhanced with a tiny golden tassel, which bobbles charmingly as she walks. Lovely madam, you say? She inclines her head regally. She's never sailed finer. The family gathers for supper. You hover, just out of sight, ready in case of wig emergencies, soup mishaps, ribbon droopage, or the occasional spontaneous sneeze that threatens powder integrity. It's a quiet meal. No visitors, no inspections, just the usual talk of trade and weather. You listen from the hallway, where the sconces glow gently and the house feels unusually peaceful. After dinner, Mr. Caldwell retires to the study. Elijah begins the lamp rounds, and you take to the wig room once more. You pick up the oak stand, your newest addition, and fit the guest wig atop it, aligning the curls with care. Then, just because you can, you tie a small purple ribbon around the base. A gift. From one wigkeeper to another. You sit a while longer, watching the room dim as daylight slips away. The shadows stretch, curling around the wig stands like polite cats. You feel a quiet satisfaction settle over you, one earned not by grandeur but by the steady comfort of things done well. Historians may not write chapters about powdered peace treaties or symbolic bread dents. But these are the moments that make up a life. Small rebellions. Small victories. A house kept running by dusters and snuffers and souls who care enough to make things lovely. Before bed, you pass by Henry's room. The door is ajar. He's fast asleep, a toy wig stand beside him with a handkerchief tied like a cape. You smile. You tiptoe to your quarters. You light your candle. You write in your notebook. Today, the Wigs revolted. We listened. We laughed. They forgave us. Then you blow out the flame and curl beneath your blanket, the scent of powder and lavender lingering in the air. You awaken to candlelight already flickering down the hallway. Elijah must be up early. The house is quiet, that rare kind of quiet only found before dawn, when everything from floorboards to teacups seems to be holding its breath. As you rise, stretch, and begin dressing, you realize today's calendar marked by a faint ink dot and a doodled wig comb, is for the quarterly sconce inspection. An ordeal, if you're honest. Each sconce, wall lamp, and freestanding taper in the house must be snuffed, cleaned, polished, and relit to prove readiness for guest visibility. This is a direct quote from Mrs. Caldwell, who believes strongly in presentation. You, meanwhile, believe strongly in the avoidance of wax burns. You pull on your apron, grab your polishing cloths and a fresh tin of brass paste, and make your way toward the first floor. Elijah is already standing in front of the library's main wall sconce with a look of artistic intensity. She's leaning, he mutters. You squint. Barely. Barely is how fires start. You both inspect the sconce. It's an elegant double arm with twisted ironwork and a small engraved medallion at the base. The flame holders are clean, the wax cups recently emptied, and the left side. Maybe, possibly, tilted half a hair. You watch as Elijah removes a small level from his tool pouch. Yes, he carries a level, and gently corrects the sconce's posture. You polish while he lectures it softly on dignity and balance. Across the hall, you begin cleaning the mirrored wall sconces. The brass is duller than you remember, and the little half-moons of soot are harder to buff away than usual. You hum a tune as you work, something old and rhythmic, learned from a woman who once claimed to have dusted Benjamin Franklin's wig. By mid-morning, the sconces gleam. Even the chandelier in the entry hall, that untrustworthy fixture with a taste for uneven burning, now shines with the polish of a well-bribed nobleman. You and Elijah step back and admire your handiwork. Performance art, he says. You mean snuffing? Yes. But elegant. And it's true, there is something about the act of bell snuffing that feels like theater. The motion, the timing, the gentle swoop of the arm. Some of the older house manuals refer to it as drawing the curtain on flame, which always made you imagine a snuffer wearing a cloak and bowing dramatically before each candle. Historians still debate whether snuffers were trained as a matter of house protocol, or if their flair was simply an expression of overworked staff looking for a moment of elegance. Some claim entire households judged servants on how gracefully they could douse a flame. Others insist it was more about efficiency and avoiding lingering smoke. In your case, it's a bit of both. At noon, the Caldwells host a visitor, a Mr. Deacon, from Philadelphia, with a mustache like a taxidermied squirrel and a walking cane that clearly hasn't been used for walking. You've seen his sort before. Loud hat. Confident stride. Smells like clove oil and misplaced authority. He comments on the sconces immediately. Brass works fine. But you've overpolished the joints. Light won't catch proper. You smile politely. Elijah nods in agreement with just the right touch of sarcasm. Noted, sir. We'll dull them up straight away. Deacon moves on, offering unsolicited opinions about wax types and floorboard graying. After he departs, leaving behind a half-eaten apple tart and 3 smudged windows, you and Elijah collapse in the kitchen with weak tea and shared sighs. I give him 6 days before a candle eats his sleeve, Elijah mutters. 3 if it's windy. That afternoon, you receive an unexpected request. Mrs. Caldwell would like the snuffers arranged on display. Display? You ask, surprised. Yes, she says, as if this were the most natural suggestion in the world. They are beautiful, aren't they? You pause. Yes, ma'am. They are. You spend the next hour selecting the finest snuffers from the house supply. Brass ones shaped like tulips, pewter ones with swan-necked handles, even one iron bell with a carved wooden grip shaped like a lion's paw. You clean each piece until it gleams, then arrange them on the entry hall sideboard beneath the winter garland. Henry walks by, pauses, and squints. Are they sleeping? No, you say. They're waiting. For what? For flame. He seems to respect that answer. You add a small placard, at Mrs. Caldwell's request, that reads, Instruments of Gentle Dusk. A bit dramatic, yes, but not wrong. Later, as the sun begins to slide behind the rooftops, you begin the actual snuffing. One by one, you move through the house, extinguishing each candle with quiet precision. You start with the dining room sconces, double-armed brass, flame steady. The snuffer bell hovers, then drops with a graceful whoosh. The flame disappears. Smoke curls upward like a question mark that needs no answer. Next, the hallway lamps. Each one bows to the snuffer in turn, obedient and faintly resentful. You imagine them whispering to one another afterward, plotting their reignition. You finish with the study taper, a short, tired candle near the windowsill. Mr. Caldwell has already retired. The room is quiet except for the ticking clock and the crackle of the hearth. You lower the bell one last time. Snuff. Silence. The house glows now only from the hearths. The work of the flame is done for the day. You return the snuffer to its hook beside the powder tins and sit on the bench, hands in your lap, breath slowing. It occurs to you, not for the first time, that this moment of ending, is just as important as the lighting. The ceremony of closure. The art of rest. You think about how many hands have held these same snuffers over the decades. How many flames have flickered out under their quiet watch. How many small, careful acts make a house a home. In your notebook later that night, by the glow of a single taper, you write. Snuffers don't take away light. They offer pause. They say, that's enough for today. You blow out the candle. And in the dark you smile. Some mysteries in a house reveal themselves slowly. A missing spoon, a footprint in flour, the gradual disappearance of Mrs. Caldwell's candied ginger stash. Others arrive with the immediacy of a sneeze in a powder room. You are in the wig parlor, brushing out the guest wig, just a light fluff, nothing aggressive, when you realize something is wrong. Very wrong. Sir Pompington is missing. You check the stand again. Then under the table. Then on top of the armoire, in case Elijah has been unusually whimsical. But no, he is most certainly gone. Gone, as in vanished. Gone, as in one of the most important wigs in the household has grown legs and wandered off into the ether. You resist the urge to shout. Instead, you calmly march to Elijah, who is oiling the front door hinges with the concentration of a cathedral builder. Sir Pompington, you say. Yes? He replies without looking up. He's gone. Now he looks up. Gone? Gone, gone. Not shifted. Not borrowed. Vanished. Elijah lowers the oil can. When did you last see him? Yesterday evening. Third stand from the left. I remember because I accidentally powdered my own nose reaching for his comb. The investigation begins. You and Elijah retrace every possible step. Was he moved to another stand? Checked. Set out for airing and forgotten? Unlikely, it rained. Taken for maintenance? No requests logged. You even checked the laundry line, on the off chance Henry's imagination has taken another aggressive turn. No sign of the wig. Mrs. Caldwell is not yet aware, thank the heavens, but the house staff begins to murmur. A missing wig, especially one of Sir Pompington's reputation, is no small matter. Henry, of course, is the first suspect. You find him in the kitchen, solemnly wrapping an onion in lace. Henry, you ask gently, have you seen Sir Pompington? He looks genuinely surprised. Is he the grumpy one? Yes. Nope. I was with Elijah all morning. We were looking at worms. You glance at Elijah, who nods, confirming the worm detail with a half-smile. You dig deeper. The gardener hasn't seen it. Mrs. Keene swears she hasn't touched the stands. No one else in the household even dares to move wigs. Except, perhaps, the goat. You follow a trail of suspicious crumbs to the rear yard, where the Caldwell's pet goat, Matilda, is chewing on something white and suspiciously curled near the hydrangeas. Oh no, you whisper. Approaching carefully, you reach for the item. Matilda looks up with a face that can only be described as smug. Beside her is a half-chewed ribbon, 2 curls, and one recognizable piece of lace trim from Sir Pompington's chin strap. She ate him? Elijah says, arriving breathless. Not entirely, you reply, inspecting the remains. The damage is significant. The back curls are frizzled, half the powder has clumped with goat saliva, and the lace is, how shall we say, beyond prayer. Elijah exhales. Historians still argue whether goats in colonial households were viewed as pets or pests. Historians have clearly never met Matilda. You gather the remains, gently, like picking up the pieces of a fallen comrade. Back in the wig room, you lay them out on the table. Henry wanders in, sees the devastation, and gasps. She ate Sir Pompington? Partially. Can we rebuild him? You consider. It's not hopeless. The foundation is still intact. With some boiling water, powdered starch, ribbon replacement, and enough patience to fill a carriage, you might be able to restore him. You set to work. First, the detangling. This takes time, gentleness, and a comb so fine it could split hairs in half-lengths. Elijah assists with the starch, carefully warming it over a low flame. You remake the curl lines using a curling ironstone and a steady hand. The powdered sections are stripped and reapplied. Henry insists on designing a new chin strap, blue ribbon with a small gold bell. You politely decline the bell. By evening, the wig is once again upright. A little smaller, perhaps. A little humbled. But intact. You place it gently on its stand. Elijah bows. Sir Pompington, he says formally, you've returned from the underworld. You glance at the goat through the window. She stares back, unapologetic. The next day, Mr. Caldwell enters the wig room, glances at Sir Pompington, and pauses. Something's different. You freeze. Elijah stares at the floor. New ribbon? Mr. Caldwell says. You nod enthusiastically. Good choice, he says. Adds gravity. You exhale. Mrs. Caldwell enters moments later, raising an eyebrow at the slightly different profile. He looks refreshed, she says. Reborn, Elijah adds helpfully. That night you write in your notebook. Sir Pompington has returned. Shorter, wiser, slightly more edible, but still noble. You look at the wig room before turning in. The stands are all in their place. The powder tins are organized. The goat is locked in her pen. All is well. You snuff the last candle. And for once, even the wigs seem to rest easy. The next few days pass in a hush of routine, as if the household itself is catching its breath after the great wig incident. Sir Pompington, now lovingly nicknamed the Survivor by Elijah, is back in rotation, albeit with a new dignity and just a touch more starch in his step. But as the dust settles, quite literally, you find yourself drawn to a corner of the storage room you rarely visit. It's a narrow shelf tucked behind the hat boxes and old lantern wicks, covered in a light layer of lint and long-forgotten intentions. Here lie the comb polishers. Not the combs, mind you, those are in daily use. These are the forgotten polishing kits, velvet cloths, bone-handled mini-brushes, a half-used vial of comb oil labeled for ivory only, and a folded instruction manual written in the most flowery script imaginable. It reads, Polish with care, for the mirror of the comb reflects the dignity of the wig. A bit dramatic. Still, you can't help but feel a pull. Comb polishing was once a guild craft, now almost extinct. Back when wigs weren't merely curled but honored, each comb, whether ivory, horn, or carved cherrywood, was polished to a gleam that could rival brass. A shining comb was a mark of elegance, of professionalism, of someone who took their coiffure seriously. Historians still argue whether this guild ever officially existed or if it was simply a matter of pride passed through apprenticeships. There's little formal record, but some estate ledgers from the 1740s list polishers' oil among their purchases, and several old manuals mention combing implements deserving care equal to the curls they serve. You sit down at the polishing table, pull out a faded cloth, and begin. The comb is small, carved from what looks like birch, with delicate notches worn smooth by decades of use. You dampen the cloth with the tiniest dab of oil and begin to rub gently in slow circles. As you work, a quiet rhythm emerges. Circular strokes. Wipe. Inspect. Repeat. It's surprisingly satisfying, soothing in a way that few tasks are. The comb begins to shine under your care, the wood warming slightly beneath your fingertips. Tiny flecks of old powder dislodge like ghosts being respectfully released. Elijah walks in, pauses at the door. You polishing combs now? I found the kit. He nods. About time someone honored the tools. He joins you at the table with a tin of dented brass snuffer bells and a file. The two of you work side by side in content silence, restoring your tools like knights preparing armor, albeit for a battle involving wigs and wax. Henry, naturally, arrives shortly thereafter. Is this a secret meeting? It is now, Elijah says. What are we meeting about? Comb shine. Henry thinks this over, then disappears. He returns 5 minutes later with a fork and a very solemn expression. I brought my own comb. You don't correct him. Instead, you hand him a polishing cloth, and the three of you fall into a hush of gentle brushing and buffing, the room scented faintly with oil and old wood. By the end of the hour, the combs gleam. Even the fork looks dignified, if confused about its new identity. You take a moment to arrange the polished combs on a small velvet tray, 3 for daily use, 2 for special occasions, and 1 with a chip in the tooth that you've grown oddly fond of. Elijah suggests naming it Old Snagger. You do not object. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell enters the powder room while you're organizing the freshly gleaming combs. She pauses. Picks one up. This is new. Old, you correct gently. Just cleaned. She smiles faintly. I remember my grandmother had one like this. Used to say, you can tell the state of a house by the state of its combs. I believe that. She sets it down, nods once, and exits. You feel strangely validated. That evening, Mr. Caldwell calls for the ceremonial comb. You hesitate. unsure what he means, until Elijah guesses he's referring to the large tortoise-shell piece used for his court wig's final fluff. You retrieve it, polish to a quiet shine, and hand it over with the respect it clearly demands. Mr. Caldwell inspects it, sniffs once, approvingly, and disappears into his study. The comb lives to serve another day. That night you jot in your notebook. We polished combs until they remembered their own purpose. You feel calmer than you have in days. Maybe it's the oil. Maybe it's the ritual. Maybe it's the comforting truth that even the smallest tools, when cared for, shine brighter than anyone expects. The next morning, you notice something curious. The guest's wig's curls lie just a little more willingly. The powder clings a touch more evenly. The act of combing feels smoother, more precise, like the wig itself is responding to the polished tools with gratitude. You smile. Elijah notices. Wig's behaving? She knows. You return the comb to its tray, now displayed proudly near the powder tins. And from the window, the sun catches the teeth of the comb just so, turning them into a brief, glowing crown. A reminder, perhaps, that even in a world of politics, pastries, and unpredictable goats, there is dignity in detail. The trouble with wigs, you've come to realize, is that they're never just wigs. They are statements. Shields. Sometimes outright declarations of opinion, especially when those opinions involve politics, which, in colonial Boston, means everything from where you buy your tea to how tightly you curl your side flares. You don't usually think of wig dusting as a political act. Powder, after all, is neutral, until it isn't. It starts on a Wednesday. Mr. Caldwell receives a formal invitation delivered by hand and sealed with far more wax than necessary. He opens it at breakfast, squinting at the calligraphy. Public reading, he mutters. Custom house. Speeches. Refreshments. Mrs. Caldwell raises an eyebrow. One of those gatherings? He only nods. By those gatherings, of course, she means a local meeting where concerned gentlemen come together to exchange well-rehearsed outrage about Crown policies while consuming enough wine and cake to qualify as a banquet. Mr. Caldwell always attends, always brings the travel wig, and always insists on extra powder. To make the curls stand taller, he says. A visual statement. You begin prepping the wig with the usual calm. But then Mrs. Caldwell appears behind you, arms crossed. Not the white powder, she says. You freeze. She gestures toward the storage shelf. Use the ochre. The ochre is a faintly yellow-toned powder, rarely employed. It suggests modesty, frugality, and a vague alignment with local merchants, a polite political wink to patriot sympathies. The white powder, more dramatic and French in tone, is seen by some as loyalist adjacent. It's a color choice with consequences. You pause. Does Mr. Caldwell know? He doesn't need to, she says coolly. But others will. Ah. Politics by powder. You carefully apply the ochre, working it into the curls with slow strokes. It clings differently. Subtler. Less pomp, more quiet confidence. Elijah passes by, peeks in, and whistles low. He's going ochre? Apparently. He shakes his head. It begins. Historians still argue whether wood color was ever officially associated with political allegiance. Some say it's nonsense. Coincidence and fashion overlap easily. Others claim it was as coded as a flag. In Boston especially, where you might be judged by the pitch of your sneeze, anything is possible. When Mr. Caldwell sees himself in the mirror, he pauses. Tilts his head. Bit. Duller than usual? Elegant, you say? He narrows his eyes, then nods. Yes. Very dignified. At the custom house, he wears the ochre wig proudly. You and Elijah lurk just outside, keeping a polite distance, and watching the slow theater of powdered posturing unfold. The white-wigged loyalists stand together on one side, shiny and immaculate, smelling faintly of imported cologne. The ochre and ash-toned wigs cluster near the portico, casually pretending not to be watching the loyalists. Mr. Caldwell shakes hands on both sides. Neutral, as always. But his wig speaks volumes. Later that evening, back at the house, You dust off the ochre and store the travel wig carefully. Elijah grins. Think he's switching sides? No, you reply. Just switching powders. The days that follow are, oddly enough, more charged. Visitors look twice at the wigs on display. A courier from the tailor glances at Sir Pompington's ribbon and frowns slightly. Even the fishmonger, normally indifferent to hairpieces of any kind, mutters something about egg-colored curls when passing the gate. You feel it. Wig tension. One afternoon, Henry bursts into the wig room with a conspiratorial whisper. There's a rumor. Of course there is. That the ochre wig caused Mr. Pruitt's argument with the Reverend. You raise an eyebrow. I thought that was over spoons. Nope. Wig color. Pruitt said the ochre was common. Reverend said it was prudent. Then Pruitt threw a tart. Scandalous. Henry nods solemnly. I wrote it down in my playbook. He shows you a folded scrap of paper that reads: Act 3, Scene I, The Wigful Quarrel. A powder divides a pastry. You hand it back with all due respect. That evening you begin checking the other wigs. Just in case. You note powder types, curl stiffness, scent traces. One still faintly carries the unfortunate lemon of a few weeks back, and even the ribbon conditions. All in perfect order. No suspicious signs of sabotage or unapproved modifications. Still, you decide to prepare a neutral blend. Something pale, but not stark. Scented only faintly with lavender. Neither loyalist nor patriot. The Switzerland of powders. You call it evening ivory. The next morning, Mr. Caldwell asks for Sir Pompington. You hesitate. He's currently restarched. He frowns. Then the courtroom wig. You fetch it and apply the evening ivory blend, working quickly but thoroughly. No statements today. Just decorum. Respectability. Legal curls and reasonable powder. As you help Mr. Caldwell fit the wig, he studies himself again in the mirror. This seems balanced. Exactly. He nods. No further commentary. That night, as you clean the brushes and tins, you find Elijah already in the parlor, reading from a pamphlet someone left behind. He looks up. They're writing letters about wig powder now. Letters? He holds it up. Concerning the symbolic undertones of ochre in the modern Republican hairpiece. You groan. He grins. Want to write a reply? You think about it. And in your notebook that night, under the glow of a calm taper, you scribble. The politics of powder are subtler than war. But make no mistake, they rattle just as loud. You close the book. You snuff the candle. And you dream of neutral blends and tarts thrown in protest. By the weekend, it seems that wig politics have entered their theatrical phase. Powder preferences are no longer a quiet detail, they're open declarations. The guests arriving at the Caldwell household for the monthly card night arrive dressed less like neighbors and more like powdered diplomats. You see them from the second-floor window as they disembark carriages. White wigs fluffed like wedding cakes, ash-gray coils signaling austere disapproval, and one gentleman, unmistakably Mr. Fletchley, sporting a powdered blue pompadour that could only mean two things, vanity or protest. Possibly both. Inside, you and Elijah prep the display wigs for public admiration. Marigold has been placed front and center on her stand, her curls refreshed and her miniature anchor polished. Sir Pompington watches from his slightly less visible spot, as if silently judging the others. Mrs. Caldwell has requested that all guest visible wigs be lightly dusted with the evening ivory blend you created. Not too radical, she insists, but certainly not suspiciously bland. So you sift and swirl and brush with practiced ease. The scent is soothing, the color perfectly non-committal. Henry helps by tying ribbons, his latest hobby, and manages to restrain himself from adding bells this time. As the guests begin to filter in, you and Elijah retreat to your usual position, just out of sight, in the hall behind the drawing room's velvet curtain, armed with extra powder, combs, and 2 emergency snuffer bells. The game begins. You hear the soft flutter of playing cards, the polite murmurs of social intrigue, and now and then, the subtle clearing of a throat when someone spots a wig beginning to droop. It's a tense ballet of curls and conversation. One woman, seated near the fireplace, begins to wilt under the heat. Her curls soften visibly, the powder clumping slightly at the roots. You're dispatched with stealth and a fan, dabbing gently and murmuring something about humidity interference. Elijah follows with a quick touch-up comb and a small puff of refreshment powder. She's holding, he whispers on the return trip. Barely. You take a breath. Another round of cards begins. Historians still argue whether such salons were truly political or simply gossip cloaked in highbrow discussion. The truth, you suspect, lies somewhere in the middle, strategy beneath the lace, diplomacy masked by baked goods. At the refreshments table, someone knocks over a bowl of candied figs. Powder scatters. A ribbon flutters dramatically to the floor. For a moment, everything stills. Then a soft chuckle breaks the tension. You peek around the curtain and see Mrs. Caldwell holding the fallen ribbon aloft with 2 fingers. Well, she says cheerfully, at least it wasn't a tar pie. Laughter ripples. The room breathes again. Later in the evening, one of the guests, Mr. Claremont, powdered in a cream-tone blend with a flourish of clove scent, approaches the wig display. He gazes at Marigold, then turns to you. Tell me, he says, was the anchor intentional or symbolic? You consider. Both, you reply. She represents stability in uncertain times. He nods thoughtfully. A nautical metaphor. Admirable. He walks away, deeply impressed. You catch Elijah grinning behind a taper. I didn't know Wigs had manifestos. They do now. Around midnight the final card is played, and the guests begin their slow, powdered exodus. Curls are smoothed one last time. Snuffer bells are employed gently along the staircases. You and Elijah extinguish the hallway sconces with reverence, one by one. At the entry hall, Mrs. Caldwell pauses beside the wig display. They notice Marigold, she says quietly. She made a statement, you reply. And Sir Pompington? Supervised. She smiles. Good. After the guests leave, you begin your nightly ritual, restoring the combs, covering the wig stands, and brushing the day's dust from the powder tins. Elijah oils the snuffer hinges and mutters something about starting a memoir. You jot in your notebook. Tonight, the Wigs debated as fiercely as the guests. But only one anchor stood still. The next morning, the sun rises without ceremony. The house rests in that rare state of post-event peace. No visitors. No card games. No powdered politics. You find yourself drawn to the garden, where Henry is attempting to train Matilda the goat to wear a ribbon. She seems unbothered. Elijah says I should try a crown next, Henry says. You nod. Aim high. Back in the wig room, you pull out a lesser-used piece, a soft brown court wig with gentle curls and no embellishment. It's not flashy. Not particularly fashionable. But it's comfortable, unapologetically so. You brush it slowly, smoothing the curls without powder. The natural fibers glow slightly in the morning light. A humble masterpiece. You leave it on the stand, no ribbon, no label. Just ready. That afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell walks by, pauses, and peeks inside. She studies the brown wig, smiles faintly. Sometimes, she says, plain says the most. You nod. That evening, you light the hallway sconces early, just because you like the way they warm the wallpaper. Elijah finds you humming in the parlor, polishing a snuffer bell with your sleeve. You know, he says, there's talk of a wig census. A what? Inventory by powder type, curl pattern, political lean. Completely anonymous, of course. You shake your head. They'll be weighing ribbons next. He raises an eyebrow. Already are. You both laugh. And somewhere behind you, a wig quietly resettles on its stand, basking in its own quiet opinion. Sunday arrives like a cat curled at the foot of the bed, quiet, a little smug, and insistent that you move slowly. The air is still, with only a hint of chimney smoke drifting through the neighborhood. For once, no carriages rattle past before sunrise. Even Matilda the goat appears contemplative. You allow yourself a rare indulgence, a longer morning routine. No rushing to prep ribbons, no emergency powder blends, No guests expected. It's the kind of day when the candles stay unlit until evening and the house seems to whisper, "Go on. Take your time." After breakfast, right toast and weak tea, you wander into the wig room with no immediate task in mind. The combs are polished, the powder tins refilled, and every wig sits neatly on its stand like a row of powdered judges awaiting a verdict. Except for one. The corner stand is empty. You feel your stomach drop. Again? But then you remember, today is laundry day, and that particular wig, Mrs. Caldwell's lesser-used lavender-powdered bouffant, is currently airing by the window in the drying room, clipped carefully beside the napkins. You make a mental note to collect it before Henry mistakes it for a hat. With the room settled, you decide to tend to something most forget exists: the wig boxes. Not the display stands or the powder tins, but the storage boxes stacked beneath the shelves. Each one carefully labeled in fading script: Church, Travels, Courthouse Reserve, Seasonal Specials, and one simply marked James, the only name you don't recognize. You pause over the James box. It's smaller than the others and made of polished cherrywood, far nicer than the average cardboard or painted tin. The latch is stiff with disuse, but with a little coaxing it opens. Inside is a wig unlike any you've seen in the household. It's pale gold, with soft ringlets instead of the usual curled rows. No powder. No stiffening starch. Just light, delicate strands held in place with a faded green ribbon. You lift it gently. It smells faintly of rosewater and, oddly enough, ink. Tucked beneath the wig is a folded scrap of parchment, creased at the corners. You open it. One line, written in a graceful, sure hand. For when the words come easily, you stare. A writer's wig? You didn't know such a thing existed. Elijah appears in the doorway. Find treasure? You gesture him over. He peers into the box, raises an eyebrow. That's not one of the family's usual wigs. I've never seen it out. Maybe it belonged to whoever James was. You hold up the note. He reads it. Nods slowly. There's something about it, he murmurs. You can tell it's not just decorative. Historians still debate whether wigs were assigned specific purposes beyond social events, whether the idea of writing wigs or thinking wigs was widespread or simply eccentric tradition. Some diaries hint at men who wore softer wigs while composing letters, claiming that the lack of powder kept their heads cooler and their thoughts sharper. Others dismiss such notions as poetic nonsense. But here it is. Real. Preserved. You sit with the wig in your lap a while longer. It's oddly comforting. Later, you ask Mrs. Caldwell about the box. She smiles wistfully. Ah, that was my Uncle James, she says. A pamphlet writer. Satirical mostly, though he thought himself a philosopher. Was the wig special? Very. He said he couldn't write a single line without it. Claimed the curls knew how to think better than he did. You chuckle. Did it work? Sometimes. Other times it fell into his tea. She nods at you. You may use it if you like. The offer surprises you. Use it? You write, don't you? You blink. A bit. Well, she says, when the words don't come, borrow his curls. That night, after the candles are trimmed and the hallway sconce is snuffed, you return to your room with the James wig in hand. You set it gently on the desk. You light a taper, not for work, just for company. And you write. Not a task list. Not a powder blend. Just thoughts. You write about Sir Pompington's recovery. About Henry's ribbon experiments. About the time Elijah nearly fell asleep standing up during a 3-hour sermon while pretending to hold a wig comb in solemn reflection. And the words come easily. You don't even notice you're smiling until your candle flickers low and the wig's curls shimmer in the fading light. You place it back in its box with care. Before bed, you jot one last note in your usual journal. Some wigs are worn for show. Others, to feel more like yourself. You blow out the candle. And the house settles into sleep, carrying the softest scent of rosewater and ink. Morning sunlight creeps through the shutters and slats, casting thin golden lines across your floor like someone tried to measure the room with daylight. You wake slowly, your thoughts still half tangled in the ringlets of Uncle James' wig. There's something oddly peaceful about remembering a wig that didn't need pomp or politics, just a bit of ink and purpose. You sit up, stretch, and sniff the air. Cinnamon. This can only mean one thing: Mrs. Keene is baking the molasses buns again. You hasten your morning preparations with a bit more cheer than usual. The James wig remains in its cherrywood box, undisturbed on your desk like a sleeping cat. You decide to leave it there today. It seems content. Downstairs, the air is warm and heavy with sugar and spice. Henry is crouched near the oven, narrating the bun baking process in the style of a sea captain. Elijah stands behind him, arms crossed, sipping coffee with the solemnity of a man who has not yet achieved full consciousness. "The buns are rising, Captain!" Henry exclaims. "Steady as she goes," Elijah murmurs. You accept a bun as Mrs. Keene offers one with a knowing nod. "Eat it before it sags," she advises. And you do. Warm, soft, and slightly sticky, like chewing on a hug. After breakfast, your day begins properly with a few routine wig inspections. The travel wig is behaving. The courtroom wig still smells faintly of cloves. And the brown humble masterpiece you fluffed 2 days ago has developed a pleasant ripple from the humidity, like a curl stretching in its sleep. As you tidy the powder room, you hear Elijah's voice from the hallway. "Mail's come!" You meet him by the front door where a small stack of parchment envelopes rests, tied with twine. He tosses you one with your name on it. You open it carefully. The letter is short. Elegant handwriting. To the custodian of powdered grace. "I am told your hands have restored more than curls. I write to request a quiet consultation. No powder. Just tea. Warmly. A.L." You blink. Then check the seal. The wax bears a stamped tulip, slightly smudged. Elijah peers over your shoulder. "A secret admirer?" "Hardly. Sounds more like someone in need of powdered counseling?" He chuckles. "Take your best ribbon. You never know." The meeting is scheduled for late afternoon at a small tea house 2 streets away, known mostly for its scones and scandalous muffins. You dress without fanfare, plain shirt, clean coat, no flourishes, and carry with you a slim pouch of neutral powder and a handkerchief just in case. The tea house is quiet. A few patrons sip silently, absorbed in the sacred business of steeping leaves and avoiding eye contact. You spot the writer of the letter almost immediately. A young woman, perhaps 30, sits near the back, her wig simple but worn askew, like it was rushed onto her head with no particular ceremony. She offers a smile that's half apology, half invitation. "Are you the custodian?" You grin. "That's a bit grand. But yes." She gestures to the seat across from her. You sit. "I didn't come for powder," she says. "I came for quiet." "Then I'll be quiet." The tea arrives, 1 pot, 2 cups, a plate of lemon slices arranged like tiny fans. She speaks slowly, explaining that she's recently inherited a small estate. That she's overwhelmed. That the house came with 23 wigs and no instruction manual. "One of them has antlers," she says flatly. You sip your tea. "It's decorative. Probably a ceremonial hunting wig. I wore it to a christening." You try very hard not to laugh. She sighs. "I don't want to look foolish. But I also don't want to pretend I'm something I'm not." You nod. She looks up. "How do you do it? Make these things mean something." You think. "It's not about the wigs," you say. "It's about who you are while you're wearing them." She's quiet. "Some people use wigs to become someone else," you add. "Some wear them to feel more like themselves." She leans back, considering this. Then smiles faintly. "I've been wearing mine to hide." You return the smile. "That's allowed too. Sometimes hiding is just resting in costume." She laughs softly. You spend the next 20 minutes discussing powder blends, comb types, and the merits of ribbon starching. Answer: minimal. By the time the teapot is empty, her shoulders have dropped an inch. "You've been very kind," she says. "I didn't expect." Understanding. You shrug. Wigkeepers are the least judgmental people you'll ever meet. We see everyone at their fluffiest. She laughs again. Will you come to the estate sometime? Just help me make sense of it? Of course. You leave the tea house lighter, as if some of the powdered weight of the world has been brushed from your own curls. It's not often someone asks for help with their true self, rather than their appearance. You return to the Caldwell house as the sun dips low, tinting the windows honeygold. Elijah meets you in the entryway. Well? She's lovely. She cry? Nearly. He hands you a biscuit. Then you did it right. That evening, you give James Wig one nod of thanks before returning it gently to the box. You feel like it deserves a rose or something. Maybe you'll leave it a poem next time. Before bed, in your journal, you write, sometimes, the finest service you can offer isn't in the powder or the curl, but in telling someone they're not the only one who's confused by wigs with antlers. You blow out the candle. And for the first time in a while, you fall asleep smiling. You wake to the sound of rhythmic tapping. Not thunder. Not Matilda attempting yet another jailbreak. It's the unmistakable beat of a ladle on a kettle, the kitchen's way of saying, big news, come quickly. When you arrive, Mrs. Keene is stirring oatmeal with far more gusto than usual, her cheeks pink from gossip and steam. Elijah, she says dramatically, has been invited to a wig duel. You blink. A duel? Elijah, seated calmly at the kitchen table with a spoon halfway to his mouth, nods. Figurative. I hope. Henry appears behind a stack of toast. It's real. The rules are printed. He hands you a folded sheet titled Wigsmanship, a gentle challenge of curl and composure. Below, in cramped but legible ink, is the signature of Archibald Trusby, one of the more flamboyant wig stylists from the other side of town. Known for powder puffs the size of dinner rolls and an irritating fondness for calling everyone dearest. You read aloud. I hereby challenge the keeper of the Caldwell curl to a demonstration of elegance, restraint, and creative ribbon work. 3 wigs. 1 afternoon. Neutral ground. Scoring to be overseen by a neutral bonnet maker. You look up. Is this a thing now? Apparently, Elijah sighs. The last person he challenged lost by 1 ribbon loop and hasn't been seen socially since. Mrs. Keene snorts. Rubbish. All flair, no finesse. Still, it's settled. The duel, or the display, as it's formally dubbed, will take place the following day in the rear garden of Madame Ellery's Hat Emporium, beneath the striped awning. Neutral ground, surrounded by feathered hats and mildly judgmental pigeons. You spend the morning helping Elijah prepare. It's less dramatic than one might think, no slapping gloves or shouted challenges. More like carefully selecting brushes and polishing snuffer bells just in case. He decides to bring 3 wigs, marigold, for complexity, the brown humble masterpiece, for understated grace, and a third you've only seen once before, a sleek, low-profile court wig trimmed with deep burgundy ribbon and shaped into almost architectural angles. I call it the arch, Elijah says. It looks like it could support scaffolding. Exactly. You help pack the travel box, making sure the powder tins are secure and the ribbons untangled. Henry, now fully self-appointed squire, carries a flask of lavender starch and 3 emergency compliments written on folded scraps of parchment in case Elijah loses confidence mid-display. The walk to Madame Ellery's is surprisingly pleasant. A soft breeze, a sky full of fluffy clouds that look like overly powdered wigs themselves. The streets are quiet, as if Boston itself is pausing for this peculiar moment of fashion-based drama. At the Emporium, a small crowd has gathered, mostly apprentices, lace workers, and 2 or 3 very serious bonnet enthusiasts who claim to be there for the artistry. Archibald Trusby is already present, fluttering around his wig stands like a nervous peacock. His selected pieces are bold. 1 wig shaped like a galleon ship, complete with rigging. Another with dangling tassels that sway with every step. The third looks suspiciously like it's stuffed with dried lavender and arrogance. Madame Ellery, resplendent in a hat that could double as a parasol, steps forward and raises her hand. Let the display begin. There is no music. No speeches. Just slow, reverent preparation. Elijah begins with Marigold. She is placed gently, curls adjusted with near ceremonial care. The anchor charm glints in the sunlight. The powder, evenly dusted, emits the softest shimmer. Trusby responds with his ship wig, complete with a tiny stitched sail that flutters in the wind. The crowd murmurs. Next, Elijah unveils the humble brown wig. No powder. No ribbon. Just honest, gentle curls. Trusby smirks, then unveils the tassel monstrosity. Someone in the crowd sneezes as a tassel flops dramatically in their direction. Finally, the arch. Elijah lifts it with both hands. The curves are flawless. The burgundy ribbon lies like a signature of intent. He places it carefully, steps back, and folds his arms. Trusby unveils his final piece, an overly stiff confection of ringlets shaped into what appears to be a question mark. The judges, 2 hatters and a bonnet trimmer named Gloria, confer. Tension buzzes like a misaligned powder fan. Then the verdict. First round, Marigold over ship. Complexity wins over flair. Second round, humble brown wig versus tassel terror. The brown wins by virtue of restraint. Third round, the arch versus question mark. A close match, until one of Trusby's ringlets uncurls mid-judgment and lands on a judge's lap. Victory, Elijah. 3 for 3. The crowd claps. Quietly. It's a very polite crowd. Trusby sighs, bows, and offers his hand. Well played, dearest. Elegance defeats ambition. Elijah shakes it. You had the better tassels. You return to the Caldwell house triumphant. Henry tries to commission a medal. Mrs. Keene bakes a small cake. That night, as you sit in your room, you open your journal and write. Wigs dueled today. But not in anger. In pride. In powder. In poise. You glance toward your cherrywood box. James would have liked this, you think. And maybe if he'd been there, he'd have said, some battles are fought with curls instead of cannons. And some victories are best left unpowdered. You smile, then turn out the light. The next morning begins with a letter, again. This time it's delivered not by hand or ribbon-tied courier, but slipped discreetly beneath the front door like a secret or a very formal apology. The paper is thick, cream-colored, and smells faintly of cedar. You open it with care. To the esteemed keepers of the Caldwell Wigs. Your recent display at Madame Ellery's has caused quite a stir among the gentleware societies. In light of your evident skill, grace under tassel, and ability to keep ribbons free of dramatic fraying, we extend a humble invitation to attend the annual Assembly of Domestic Artisans, Boston chapter. We believe your insights would greatly benefit our deliberations. Tea shall be provided. It's signed by the Secretary of the Boston Gentleware and Mantle Association, whose title includes no fewer than 5 semicolons and at least 1 decorative monogram. You show the letter to Elijah, who reads it twice, expressionless. Then, they want us to speak. To artisans. About wigs. He nods. I need my polite ribbon. Henry, eavesdropping from under the coat rack, chimes in. I'll start packing teaspoons. We mustn't look amateur. The assembly is scheduled for the next day, so you spend the afternoon gathering notes. Not formal talking points, mind you, but the sort of thoughts that drift around your head during wig brushing, the emotional architecture of a side curl, the implied authority of a well-chosen powder, the way some ribbons feel like a whisper while others practically stomp. You rehearse a few sentences in front of the mirror, but end up making yourself laugh. Elijah advises you to simply speak like you're comforting a panicked wig stand. The next morning, you both dress in your best waistcoats, shine your shoes until they squeak faintly on the stairs, and select 1 demonstration wig each. Elijah chooses the arch, naturally. You select the humble brown. Henry hands you a basket with a cloth over it. For luck, he says. And snacks. You peek inside. It contains 4 lemon biscuits, a slightly misshapen croissant, and 1 hard-boiled egg with a smiley face drawn on it in soot. The assembly takes place at the 3rd floor of the Alderman's Guild House, a long room with arched windows and chairs arranged in a crescent. You and Elijah are ushered in with the kind of hushed respect normally reserved for traveling violinists or very confident cobblers. The attendees are varied bonnet makers, shoelace weavers, embroidery specialists, and one elderly man who identifies only as a button whisperer. A tall woman in pale green gestures for you to begin. You do. Softly. You speak of the daily rituals, combing, dusting, trimming. Of how a wig isn't simply an object but a mood. Of the moments when a client looks in the mirror and sees something they hadn't seen before. Not beauty, exactly, but coherence. Elijah follows, speaking about balance. About powder tones and how the right one can lower blood pressure faster than valerian. He explains that confidence is mostly starch, and that a well-fitted ribbon has prevented more arguments than all the colony's peace treaties combined. There is polite laughter. Then nods. Then murmurs of agreement. The questions come next. What powder do you recommend for coastal humidity? Do you ever starch bonnets? Is tassel work coming back or merely haunting us? You answer each one, respectfully, sometimes with a wink. The bonnet trimmer named Gloria declares your brown wig a sermon in fibers. The button whisperer invites you both for tea next week. By the time you leave, you've been offered 3 commissions, 1 speaking engagement, and a handful of walnut cookies for creativity. You walk home slowly, not because you're tired, but because the breeze is warm and it feels good to be a part of something thoughtful and strange. At the Caldwell house, Henry meets you at the door. Well? He says. We have been deemed reasonable, Elijah replies. And refreshingly humble, you add. Henry nods with exaggerated solemnity. I'll adjust the coat of arms. You return the humble brown wig to its stand, smoothing the last curl. It looks especially serene tonight. Later, over tea and a slice of pie so lemony it blinks your tongue, Mrs. Caldwell raises her cup. To victory? To dialogue, you reply. To soft authority, Elijah adds. That night, before sleep, you sit at your writing desk with the cherrywood box beside you. You don't open it this time. You simply rest your hand on the lid and write in your journal. To keep something beautiful clean is one thing. To keep it honest, another. To show people it matters. That's a kind of kindness. You pause. Then add, and if that kindness wears curls, so be it. The candle burns low. The house creaks, quietly settling into night. And all the wigs, in their powdery stillness, seem to agree. It's nearing the end of the month, and you can feel the house shifting into what you and Elijah call the molasses rhythm, a slower, more deliberate pace reserved for late spring, when days lengthen, tempers shorten, and even the furniture seems to lean back and sigh. The wig room, too, responds to the season. Powder clings differently in the damp. Ribbons refuse to lie flat unless coaxed. And the wigs themselves, if you'll allow a little whimsy, seem to wilt just a bit more quickly under the burden of May humidity. You begin the morning with the usual tasks: combing, brushing, sighing at a rebellious curl on the travel wig that insists on pointing due north. But today, you've added something new to your routine, a visitor's book. Placed gently near the door, bound in soft leather and accompanied by a feather quill, it's for those rare guests who wish to leave compliments, comments, or, as Henry gleefully encourages, dramatic haikus about wig aesthetics. You've already made the first entry yourself. If this powder speaks, let it whisper. If this curl dances, let it lead. Henry, naturally, follows with, wig in the mirror. I nod. It nods back. We friends now. Elijah's is simply, powder is not the enemy. Humidity is. By mid-morning, a delivery arrives, a new stand custom made for the Arch commissioned quietly by Mrs. Caldwell in honor of recent ribbon-based diplomacy. It's carved with fine scrollwork and polished to a dark sheen that makes the burgundy ribbons sing. You help Elijah place the wig on it, stepping back together to admire the effect. It doesn't just sit, it perches. Poised. Proud. She needs a plaque, Elijah mutters. Henry appears seconds later with a scrap of cardboard labeled Strategic Excellence in Curl Formation. You do not object. The rest of the day unfolds peacefully. The weather is mild, the tea is steady, and Matilda, miraculously, remains in her enclosure, perhaps reflecting on the nature of fences. In the afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell emerges from her reading room with a look of quiet decision. "I believe it's time," she says. You and Elijah exchange glances. Time? For the annual dusting of the archives. Ah. Once a year, usually whenever she remembers, Mrs. Caldwell insists the household attend to the old document trunks in the attic. Not for organization, no one's that ambitious, but for dusting, and spiritual refreshment, whatever that means. You agree, mostly because the trunks are a treasure trove of half-finished pamphlets, wig diagrams, dried flowers, and correspondence so florid it could be framed. Elijah carries up a broom, you take the duster, and Henry insists on wearing a cape for archival protection. The attic is cool and dim, the lights slipping in through a single round window like a sleepy eye. Dust motes float in lazy spirals. The trunks wait. The first one contains a stack of costume ribbons, most too faded to identify by origin. One particularly elaborate piece features tiny bells that chime with each movement, clearly a poor choice for anyone trying to enter a room discreetly. The second trunk holds notes from Uncle James, essays, letters, and what appears to be the beginnings of a play titled The Wig That Couldn't. You read a few lines aloud. They're oddly moving. Elijah finds a box of powder puffs labeled Spring Experiments. Do not use without gloves. You all quietly agree to ignore them. At the bottom of the final trunk, beneath a moth-nibbled handkerchief, you find a sketch. It's a wig. But not just any wig. It's bold. Asymmetrical. One side coiled like a conch shell, the other a waterfall of braid-like loops. At the bottom of the page, in Uncle James's script. For when a statement must be made, but words feel inadequate. You hold it up. Elijah leans in. That's either madness or genius. Both, you reply. Henry already has scissors and ribbon in hand. When do we start? And just like that, the statement wig becomes your next project. You clear the largest table in the wig room, roll out cloth, and begin sketching your own blueprint, adjusting the loops, tempering the tilt, choosing not one but two powder tones, soft ivory and ash rose, blended to shift slightly with the light. For the base wig, you select an unlabeled piece from the spare drawer, simple, well-structured, blank in the best way. You work late into the night. Elijah shapes the side coil with quiet precision. Henry hand-stitches the ribbon into a gentle gradient that fades like a sigh. You powder delicately, evenly, stopping every few minutes to turn the stand and assess the angles. There's no rush. No competition. Just care. By candlelight, the final curls fall into place. You step back. It's not perfect. It's not traditional. But it feels true. Mrs. Caldwell appears at the doorway, arms folded gently. Is that? You nod. James's final design. Or our version of it. She steps closer. Well, she says, it's about time someone finished his thoughts. She doesn't smile. Not quite. But her eyes soften, and you know she means it. That night you leave the wig on the stand, center table, no plaque, no fanfare. Just presence. Before sleep you write. Wigs are not just ornaments. Sometimes they are the punctuation of lives. A comma. An exclamation. Or, in James's case, an ellipsis waiting to be finished. The candle flickers low. The house exhales. And the statement wig stands quietly in the dark, content to say nothing more, for now. The morning after the statement wig is completed, you find the entire house whispering. Not in the literal sense. No one is actually hushing you, but there's a palpable quiet, like a museum before opening or a library before the storm of scholars. Even Matilda the goat refrains from her usual morning bleat, which is either a tribute to the new wig or indigestion from yesterday's biscuit. You step into the wig room to find Henry already there, seated cross-legged in front of the statement wig like he's meditating. He doesn't look up. She speaks, he says. You nod. What does she say? Mostly vowels. And maybe something about revolution. Elijah enters behind you with 2 cups of tea. He pauses at the door, surveys the table, and nods once. she's holding. Indeed, the curls have kept. The powder has settled with a gentle shimmer. The ribbons, graceful arcs of ivory and ash rose, cascade like the hem of a very quiet parade. You don't touch it. No one does. Instead, the three of you sit. Not working, not fussing. Just sitting. By noon, word has spread. It's unclear how. Possibly Henry. Possibly one of the bonnets overheard through a cracked window. But one by one, guests begin to appear, not as a crowd, not as tourists, but as curious souls drawn by the whisper of something unfinished now made whole. The first is Madame Ellery, her hat trimmed with sparrow feathers today. She steps into the room, tilts her head, and murmurs, "Oh." Then Gloria, the bonnet trimmer, arrives and simply nods once before leaving a tiny pressed violet on the table beside the wig. Even the button whisperer stops by. He doesn't say a word. Just touches the edge of the stand with 2 fingers, closes his eyes, and exhales. Historians still argue whether certain items, wigs, hats, buttons, boots, carry meaning beyond their material form. Whether they can embody emotions, stand for something unsaid. Most scholars scoff. But others, those who keep linen with reverence or preserve a shoe with its scuffs intact, will tell you that sometimes, yes, objects listen. Around mid-afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell returns from her errands, sees the small line at the door, and raises an eyebrow. You turned it into an exhibit? No, you say. She did. She steps forward, studies the wig carefully, then whispers. He would have been proud. Then, more quietly, and a little horrified it took this long. You nod. There's still time. That evening, after the last visitor has drifted off and the house returns to its usual quiet hum, you gently lift the statement wig and place it on a rotating stand in the front parlor. You don't leave a label. But you do tuck James's original sketch underneath it, just barely visible. Let them see where it started. At dinner, Mrs. Keene serves lamb stew and declares, "A statement wig deserves a statement supper." Elijah toasts with his tea. Henry wears a napkin tied like a sash. Even Matilda receives an extra slice of beet. Later that night, the house goes still. And in the quiet you reflect. You think of the first wig you brushed in this household, the hesitant way your hands moved, afraid to tug, afraid to bend. You remember Elijah teaching you the snuffing bell rhythm, Henry tying his first bow without a knot in the middle, and Mrs. Caldwell declaring, over a slice of burnt toast, that every household needs a bit of harmless vanity. You've seen wigs thrown in frustration, clutched in grief, fluffed in celebration, and abandoned in fatigue. You've seen powder used like punctuation, and curls shaped like arguments. You've seen people forget themselves and then find themselves again, sometimes in the mirror, sometimes in a ribbon, sometimes in a very silly bell-shaped coiffure named Geraldine. You sit down at your desk, light a candle, and open your journal. You write. This is more than hair. More than fashion. It is how we say, I am here. I have a place. Even if that place is slightly crooked and needs a bit of powder to hold. You pause, then add. The statement wig will not last forever. But the feeling she left behind, that will keep. You close the journal. You snuff the candle. And as the house drifts into slumber, one window at a time, you know something important has been completed. Not finished, perhaps. Just made whole. And maybe, just maybe, that's all a wig is ever meant to do. And now, as the house settles, so do you. Your breathing is slower. The thoughts that once rattled gently in your head have begun to soften, like powder settling into the soft spaces between curls. There's no more ribbon to tie tonight. No powder to blend. No curls to coax. All the work is done. The house is quiet. And so are you. Maybe you imagine the statement wig, still there on its stand, graceful, patient, watching the world without judgment. She asks nothing from you. She just exists. A monument to care, to curiosity, to quiet creativity. Let your muscles sink a little deeper into your mattress. Let your shoulders drop, like the ribbons after a long day. Let your thoughts trail off, gentle and unhurried, as if they too are walking down a softly lit hallway, headed towards sleep. There's no need to remember every curl, every character, every powdered doodle or pastry incident. Just remember the feeling. The quiet pride. The tender silliness. The joy of details. Because you, too, are a keeper of your own small rituals. And tonight you have kept them well. So breathe in slowly. And exhale, even slower. You are safe. You are still. And everything, powdered or otherwise, is at rest.